Professor Ion Mirceagă, my close collaborator here in Romania. We wrote the play together and directed the play together in Romania. He's Associate Director in the Tele-Encounters project and a Professor of Theater Directing at the National University of the Arts George Enescu in Iași.
Good afternoon. To respect the time of exposure, I will only refer to one aspect of the work on the topic of working, telematic theater and re-evaluation of discursive language. One day, after we had moved on connecting the scenes and on drawing the relationship between the characters at the visual level, the online connection was very slow. The projections were unsatisfying and the sound didn't allow the actors to understand each other. At that moment, Radu Solcanu requested that for a fruitful communication between the actors, the discursive component of the theatrical English should be given maximum importance. 100 years ago, that imperative would have been unnecessary, but especially since the drama art has been calling into question the oral expression. As Grotowski said, art's rebellion is generated by the tyranny exerted by a theater whose obligation was to illustrate the dramatic text and in which the stage was an adjuvant of playwriting. The most important wing of the insurrection, whose main germ was Artaud, effected in exempting the directors from the task of using the stage exclusively to make the dialogue plausible. Thus, the dialogue became important through what it was hiding, and the subtext became the main preoccupation during the rehearsals. After going from the painted scenery to the one with 3D, the stage favors at present the incidence of the action, and space and time became each other's feature. It was unavoidable that even the playwrights reconsidered the function of the word in theater. Ionesco, noting the inability of speech to support meanings anymore, uses during the first creation phase aberrant dialogues and advocates for decomposition of the articulated language. In the former communist countries, the stage was under assault equally from a totally different direction. It was the censorship which was interfering at two levels, the performance and before that the piece. Thank you. And before that the piece. More precisely, a playwright could not see his text on stage if he did not get past the ideological control. The changes happening after 1989 determined, from a theatrical perspective, giving up what was called Aesopian language, in a situation in which the freedom of expression caused problems related to the power of the word and the responsibilities coming from it. And the second, okay. We are far from calling into question the way art synergy contributes to theater expressivity. We are far from contesting the winnings related to the diversity of the spectacular manifestations brought by Artaud and by those who followed him. At the same time, we can't ignore the way in which the force of the word is reappraised, sometimes precisely by those who minimized it. Ionescu was writing, words are most beautiful thing, and I, as so many other people who used to mock the language in our praise. A singularity of our project is generated by the special attention given to the balance between visual and orality. The text rehearsals, especially those online, require a consistent study of sound articulation precisely because of the physical distance between the actors needed to be somehow compensated. Beyond the necessity to give coherence to the emitter-receiver relationship, the intonation, the tone, and the intensity of the utterances emerged as constituent elements of the supports for the circulation of information between the actors as well as between the performance and the audience. Speaking is in the planet of lost dreams a fundamental action, wanted, accomplished, failed, rejected, made with love or resentments, with effects sometimes healing for the sensibilities of the characters and other times devastating. Maybe we took a risk by defining the custom, but we didn't treat the word as a deadweight, but as an essential communication element. Consequently, we insisted on finding in all situations the word that is the spoken action itself, as Pirandello says, the living word which affects, the immediate expression organically tied to the action. The importance given to the work has favored the creation of a unique audio space. This kind of space has allowed us to deepen our research on how communication technologies influence human relationships. We have to equally underline the fact that the online table rehearsals generated surprising theatrical images precisely since Catherine became a more powerful energetic support than usual. In Murcia, the lines said in Romania were subtitled in Spanish, and in Buzău, the lines in Spanish were subtitled in Romanian. During the rehearsals, we used English and Spanish, and in this second case, Ruxandra Wancea, thank you Ruxandra, wherever you are, made a special effort for translating. Under these conditions, the energy flow that was set during rehearsals between directors and actors was more difficult to achieve, and the preservation of it required a special concentration. What's important to note is that this detail equally reveals the necessity to contain actors' revolution in theater and to move on by equally recovering the importance of discursive language. I would have insisted less on the way we treated the work in our performance if I hadn't participated in a very emotional event occasioned by one of the performances reserved in Buzău to the students of the Special High School for the Visually Impaired. They came to the theater accompanied by 4 teachers. They entered it in a row holding hands. They sat down on chairs, and when the performance started, the marbles faded away, nobody coughed, nobody fussed. The focus of the audience was at its top. Every word and every phrase, every interjection and every exclamation, the statements, the negatives, and the questions constituted essential elements for how the universe of the performance was structured in itself. The bridge built by the energy exchange between the audience and the actors has acquired substance. Andrea Darien said, "What does it feel like to act in front of a sightless audience? They are probably some of the few people who are present to really pay attention to you. They don't afford to let any details get by them. There was a certain silence which lets you be there in your stage reality. I asked myself, how did they see the performance? I have no idea, but I think that they notice things which the rest of us are clearly missing." The words had for us too, those on sidelines, the directors and the technical team, mass and volume, density, maximum relevance. The experience I'm talking about is the most convincing plea in favor of considering the function held by the discursive language in theater. Thank you.
Thank you.
You quoted Artaud and you referred to Kotowski,
Yes.
and you referred to Barber. It is striking to me that you're referring to theater artists who are, in a sense, from a pre-technological era, and yet you're focusing on concrete language and articulation and communication. Now, since you're working in a technological arena, this question of responsibility, I think, is a very serious one. But remember the image I showed of the drone camera. These newer systems that we have in our societies that are developed by engineers and scientists are working with algorithms, topological imagery, biometrics, artificial intelligence. That's very removed from Artaud and Kotowski. So I think we're moving into a moment, political moment, where these technologies are actually going to have many perverted effects. Do you agree?
Cred că problema unei eventuale unui eventual conflict între teatrul făcut, să spunem, până în anii 70-80 și teatrul care se încearcă acum.
I believe that the problem about the conflict between the theater that was made
Până în anii 80,
until the 1980s, 1990s, and the theater that is being done now.
Este o problemă reală,
Is a real problem.
dar așa cum îmi vine acum în minte faptul că în momentul în care pe scenă a fost folosit iluminatul electric,
But the same way that I'm thinking now that stage lighting was used for the first time,
și asta nu a dus decât la dezvoltare.
this has only led to the further development of the theater.
La fel și noile tehnologii,
The same way the new technologies,
recuperând tot ceea ce s-a scris de la Saxa Mining, s-a făcut la Saxa Mining,
by recovering everything that was done in Britain from the Saxa Mine onwards,
dacă se poate dezvolta.
the theater can develop.
În eseul pe care l-am scris în carte, munca, felul în care am muncit cu actori este descris în amănunțime.
In the essay I wrote, in the book, my work with the actors is described in detail.
Ceea ce m-a interesat, mai ales în contextul teatrului românesc din aceste vremuri,
What interested me more, especially for the context of the Romanian theater of these days,
în această intervenție,
my intervention,
este faptul că încă în România suntem
is that in
tributarii modei teatrului vizual.
Romania we're still a tributary to visual theater.
Și aceasta din mai multe considerente, din snobism, din motive comerciale
For
și din alte.
several reasons, snobbery, commercial reasons, and so on.
Ori experiența pe care am avut-o la Buzău în timpul
The
repetițiilor
experience we had in Buzău during rehearsals
mi-a atras atenția și mi-a atras atenția mie și actorilor
drew our attention, mine and the actors,
cât de important este într-un anumit tip de teatru
how important it is in a certain type of theater
ca limbajul discursiv să fie bine articulat
that discursive language which should be well articulated
și chiar să devină expresiv.
and become expressive. Bianca Fara is the coordinator of the Creative Europe desk in Romania. She's an expert in funding for culture and in European affairs, and she has been working in the arts and culture field for the last 14 years in both the independent and the public sectors in Romania and Belgium. And I should say that the Creative Europe desk were immensely helpful during the application phase. So I think part of the success of the application is due to them, so I thank them for this.
Thank you, Marina. Good afternoon, everyone. It is really our honor and pleasure to be here and speak about this project, which we knew even before it was submitted to the Creative Europe program and before it got selected. We had a very, very good experience with Marina and Professor Mircea in developing this project, helping them with what they need. But just to tell you the truth, the project was already very good. We only had some administrative recommendations, so nothing very important in terms of content. As Marina said, I represent the Creative Europe desk in Romania, which is a cultural contact point for this EU funding program. We are part of a network in 41 countries across Europe, but also internationally, which provide assistance, information, any type of support to organizations in culture which want to access this funding. Just to tell you before, very briefly presenting what this funding program is about and some tips for other organizations which want to access it and receive funding like your project did. Just to tell you that in 2017, when Tele-Encounters, this project funded by Creative Europe, was submitted, there were 548 project applications submitted from all the 41 countries, and only 81 were selected. So roughly 500, roughly 80 selected, and Tele-Encounters was among the 81 which got selected. So just do the math and see that the success rate of this program is quite low, quite demanding. And this is a proof that this project was very, very good, because the selection process at European level by independent experts and European Commission is really, really tough, and only the very, very good projects pass this phase. Also, just to tell you that the Ciprian Theatre in Buzău is among the only 3 project leaders from Romania in this culture. Tell me if you can't hear. We have only 3 project leaders from Romania under Creative Europe cooperation projects, and the theatre in Buzău is one of the leaders. Okay, so just briefly I'm sure that almost all of you, if you are the project partners mainly in the room, you know about the program, so I won't go into details. This is what we do as a Creative Europe desk, that I already mentioned. To have a broad overview of the context in which this project is functioning and was selected, I will tell you that Creative Europe is a EU funding program for the current 7-year framework, 2014-2020. It includes 3 main component parts. Culture sub-program, which funded the Tele-Encounters project, a media sub-program, and a cross-sectoral component part. I apologize, the slides are in Romanian because I couldn't manage to translate them on time, but I hope that my speaking will help. It is a program which supports the creative, cultural, and creative sectors, which is basically almost everything from performing arts to visual arts to cultural heritage to literature, audiovisual, film, publishing, radio, everything, even the gaming industry. As I said, there are 3 component parts in this Creative Europe program, and we see culture has 31%. So from that budget, the Tele-Encounters project was funded. Who's who in this context of Creative Europe? There is the European Commission, who creates the policy lines and creates the priorities of the program. Then there is an executive agency which actually implements the program in Brussels. This is where the applications are submitted to be selected, to be contracted, to be monitored and everything. And it's us, the Creative Europe Desks network in the 41 countries, which give technical assistance to organizations. The culture sub-program of Creative Europe has several stranded funds. But I will only tell you about cooperation project because this is the focus of our presentation. It also funds literature, translations of fiction, European networks, European platforms that support emerging artists. Okay. Who can participate? Almost everybody, as long as they are a legal person, they have a legal personality, not individual persons. So from non-governmental organizations to public institutions and private companies, so the for-profit sector is also welcome, as long as they have an activity in the cultural and creative sectors. They have to be from any of the 41 countries, which means everybody in the EU, but also the Western Balkans, Iceland, Norway, and countries like Georgia, Moldova, Tunisia, Ukraine, Armenia, and Kosovo. You have to have at least 2 years of legal existence when you apply for the project. Okay, so there are 2 types of projects, smaller scale and larger scale, and Tele-Encounters is a smaller scale project with a minimum of 3 partners, a grant of 200,000 euros, maximum 60%. What are the objectives of this of the cultural cooperation projects? To promote cross-border mobility, so basically artists and other culture professionals who can travel to create projects together. Also audience development, which has different layers. It also means increasing the number of public for the creative works and services and products, but also deepening the relationships with the current audiences, extending, creating, so from a non-public to a public experience, diversifying audiences, working in a different way, in a more dynamic or interactive way with audiences, and also building capacity for professionals in this sector. I will select just two things from here. What's important to remember, this is a program which operates with pre-funding, so you have a pre-funding from the EU after you get the selection project. You don't have to prove that you have the co-funding, the other 40% or 50% when you apply. You can get it along the way. So far, at the European level, there were 6 calls for proposals for cooperation projects, and you can see that these are the submitted projects, these are the selected projects, which means that the success rate is around 15%. So not that high because there's a lot of competition. Just to give you an overview of Romania's results, we have around 50 roughly organizations involved in 60 cooperation projects, and I've told you that we have only 3 leaders and all the other 45 are project partners. We mainly have public institutions involved in performing arts, but we also have NGOs. This is a platform where you can see all the results of the project, of the program, in case you want to look for other projects which are selected and looking for inspiration. Just to give you some recommendations, if there's anyone else in the room who wants to try to approach this program, this is mainly a program for cooperation. So try to think of why you want to do this. If the project idea is adapted to the objectives of the funding of Creative Europe, what are your resources and experience when carrying out the project? Is the project coherent with the objectives, the vision, and the long-term strategies of your organization? Will it help you grow as an organization? Look at the European context and international context. What has been done before? What are the trends, the policies, the tendencies? Are there any similar projects that got selected or which you want to build on? Think of partnerships, of course. What kind of partners do you need? With what kind of skills, what competencies, so that the partnership is complementary and has an added value. Try to co-interest partners, as I know the process of you identifying partners was very welcoming. Think of the quality of the partnerships, try to facilitate everybody's involvement and participation in the project. And I always think of show this picture, which I discovered, I think in the Netherlands, in a museum. For me, this is what a cooperation project should look like. Not with everybody naked, but these are basically 2 painters who painted one picture. You can't see which of them painted what. We know that one of them was good in figures, in faces, the other in landscapes, but you can't really see. It has a unit in it. It's really coherent, all in all. This is what a cooperation project should also look like. Like partners getting involved and everybody doing what they do best, so that the result looks like a single picture. Sorry for it. Try, of course, to also think of the technical side when you approach a cooperation project. Please read things that almost everybody avoids, like the guides, all the technical information that is listed on the program website. Try to get support from the Creative Europe desks. If you're from Romania, look for us. If not, for our colleagues in the other countries. Try to start at least 4 months in advance to prepare a cooperation project because it takes time. And this is what the European Commission said, that projects lack in general when they evaluate them. The absence of innovation. They have standard ideas or not very creative ideas. They recycle projects which were submitted before, or possibly in other projects like Erasmus+. Don't do that. There's a discrepancy between the quality of the ideas, which is sometimes very good, and the way these ideas are written in the application form. So try to pay attention to how you write the project as well. There's a lack of understanding in terms of the program's priorities, like transnational mobility is taken as an end in itself. You don't take the mobility criteria just because you move from one country to the other. If you build something together with your partners, you create an exhibition of a performance like you did. This is real transnational mobility. Then in audience development, there's too much focus on quantity and not quality, like deepening relationships with audiences and expanding, diversifying them. Also, something which looks more technical, but it's important. People don't usually pay attention to the communication and promotion strategy, but evaluating experts do. So this is the last slide. Try to think of European dimension. They don't fund, Creative Europe doesn't fund national projects of national relevance. Try to be innovative, think of the quality of the partnership. It's funding for projects, not for events, like very concrete actions. And it doesn't fund equipment or investments like in buildings unless to a very, very small percent, but it's basically for soft parts and cooperation. Thank you so much for your attention, and if you need have any questions, I'm here. And again, congratulations to Marina and the entire project team. You're doing an excellent job. I was in Buzău to see the performance, and I also see the actors back there. And I congratulate everybody, and good luck with if you want to continue. Have questions?
We have time for 2 questions, I think. If there is anything. When is the next call?
The next call should be launched at the end of summer, and possibly the deadline will be October or November. We don't know exactly, the European Commission has to tell us first, and they haven't informed us more precisely than that. So basically there's one call per year, every year, and it's usually the end of summer launched, and the deadline end of mid-autumn, let's say. Anybody interested in trying
So
this
would you
experience?
suggest, as you said, we need like 4 months in advance to do an application, would you suggest we use the information already provided and start thinking of something?
Exactly. Although the documents for the next call are not yet published, you can take as a reference the documents of the previous call. The changes are really small, so you can start preparing and we can help.
Should I assume that, thank you, should I assume that all partners should be in the European Union?
No.
Oh, great.
There was a list, no, I didn't. The one. These are the countries, so all the members of the EU, so all the 27. Then it's Albania, Bosnia, North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia. So these are potentially candidate countries. Then you have Iceland and Norway. And this is European neighborhood policy countries like Georgia, Moldova, Tunisia, Ukraine, Armenia, Kosovo. So it's all in all, it's 41 countries, not just the 27 in the EU.
And I'm wondering where the UK would exist in this list in some potential awful future.
Well, hopefully, we hope the UK will stay. It depends on the deal. The deal that the governments do with the EU will also impact the participation in this program. But it can participate, so it will not be among these 27, but it will be in the list. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank you as well.
So Andrea, she's the actress playing the role of the left behind daughter in Romania, and she's a graduate of the Tele-Encounters National Arts University in Iași. And she's currently studying for a master's degree at the University of Sibiu. And she works in the Bancovia Municipal Theater in Buzău, so she was hired right after university.
I will read something that I wrote. As we know, partnership on the stage requires complex communication between actors, a communication that engages their full array of resources. This occurs when the actors are walking step by step on long rehearsed routes, as well as when their acting is spontaneous. However, how can one achieve communication on the stage with a partner that one sees on the screen and still keep the whole process intact? In The Planet of Lost Dreams, my relationship with the actress in Spain, who was playing my character's mother, was facilitated by technology, and for more than 1 hour, it was an interaction with an image on the screen, accompanied by the sound in the speakers. I knew I had to act for here and for there as well, within an agreement that relied on truth, but was still subject to drama performance. The Kinect just amplified the feeling for playing a high-wire act on the stage. As a matter of fact, technology was a central element in the construction of the show, and at the same time, it was the factor that could snap out of control at any time. At such times, communication with my remote partner tended to become difficult or even impossible. Thank you. Well, I want to thank you all, and I want to thank you, Marina, for giving this opportunity, and nice to meet you all.
The actress in Murcia, was she Romanian or Spanish?
You're Romanian.
Romanian.
Yeah.
And you knew her?
No.
No. So your relationship developed across
Yeah.
the network?
There was a period of comedy rehearsals in Buzău.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we met physically.
Okay. I guess I want to just express I'm older, and coming back from Germany last week, I was totally impressed by being placed in contact with some very young artists. There was a girl who in Düsseldorf had to get permission from high school to actually be able to come. She's only 16, and she has been working for 4 years on a platform called TikTok, and is now an influencer. She dances and makes these 15-second clips on a platform where she has over 1 million followers. So I sensed when I was talking to her that she's been doing this now for years. So performing to the camera is second nature, and she feels this sense of empowerment. Did you also feel that after a while working with the camera, you felt you could really do something?
No.
Being a young actress, having grown up in a digital time, right?
Yes, but I didn't grow up with camera. Well, I discovered this something 20 years. Well, this wasn't my second nature.
Not second
No,
nature.
no.
Is it? Are you now more comfortable, or is it still for you?
I'm fighting with this, but I'm not so comfortable. I'm not feeling so comfortable in front of the camera, but I'm trying to do this because I have to. This is a skill in this community, and I have to do this. I know.
It's interesting. Because I would have thought that, in the creative industry, as an actress or as a theater person, the creative industry includes film, television, advertising. So you actually, this is your market.
Yes, but I'm shy.
You're shy.
Yeah. And this is the
Well,
reason.
you were wonderful in the performance. I really thought you were great.
I thought about the difference between making movies, like an actor, I'm an actor also.
You were the
And,
father, right?
Yes, yes. And working in theater with camera, it's a very big difference, and it's more harder, working theater with camera, because you cannot say cut, let's make another one like in movies. Cut, okay, cut. We have an entire performance, an entire show, for 1 hour and a half, and it was difficult work, but we adapted.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And well, jocul nostru era adaptat atât publicului care
Yes,
our acting was adapted
atât publicului care era în sală cât și telefonului.
both for the physically present audience but also for the smartphone.
Well,
Now you just gave me an idea. You mentioned Católica.
Yeah.
No one has mentioned Brest. What if you're in your scene, yeah? There's something that goes wrong, you say cut, and then you redo it. Wouldn't that be interesting?
Initially, we thought to make a Brechtian show. Me and Marina, and then with Javier. But we gave up, considering that a realistic show would be more emotionally. You see?
Oh, you wanted the emotion.
Yes.
Ah.
Yes. You see, in Romania, immigration is a very big problem. A very big problem, and Mr. Kiru tried to describe it. But you have to go in some villages in Buzău County or in Católica County, where very old people are living with very little children, and all of the other are going over the hills and far away to work. So,
I understand. I mean, I'm listening to you and you. When I watch recently created television dramas, I noticed on Netflix, now actors speak aside into the camera. And I think it would have interested me, even though it's a very emotional scene, you and your father and the mother, if you at some point say, I'm actually, if you cut out the I'm actually not an alcoholic.
Yes.
I'm not an alcoholic. I'm trying to play this, you know.
I don't drink.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, did this ever come up in discussion?
Yeah.
That you break the illusion for a moment and then go back into it?
yeah.
But you decided against it.
Interesting for experimental, but not
erau momente în care actorii de la Buzău relaționau ei între ei, deci nu țineau cont de cameră.
Dar eram în continuare afectați.
Dar în același timp ei știau că sunt filmați,
Da,
adevărat.
adică nu...
Momente în care actorii din Buzău relaționau unul cu celălalt.
In which the actors in Buzău, in the same space, interacted with one another.
Dar e adevărat, camera îi urmărea.
But it's true that the camera was following them.
Și în Spania se vedea interacțiunea dintre ei.
And in Spain, you could see this on-site interaction happening. So,
Iar actrița din Spania trebuia să reacționeze la interacțiunea dintre ei.
and the actors in Spain had to react to the interaction happening only in the same
Yeah.
space.
And maybe you can say something too. I mean, I'm just introducing the question of the meta level. If this is theater with film and camera and video conferencing, and you're working in a realistic or naturalistic mode, then maybe that is an old-fashioned mode that doesn't quite congrue with the newer technologies that allow you to do many things. Yeah, be self-conscious also of the fact that you are acting into a camera. I mean, wouldn't you
Maybe
agree?
you are right. Next time we'll try.
No, I'm just asking, you know.
Yeah, I think
We are asking to.
some people still want to hear a story, so maybe telling the story via technology, while technology is integrated into it, is another approach that doesn't exclude the existence.
You're still seeing technology as separate. It's not separate. This is your new medium. It is a true televisual medium. So I think anything that's possible televisually, you can use. I mean, I think,
Of course.
yeah.
Thank
And
you.
nothing on television is realistic. In my limited consumption of reality television is all absurd.
De fapt, au fost multe brechtiene, au fost
Mă refer.
monologele.
Da, dar eram în continuare, adică nu ne conectam noi pe noi.
Yeah, we're talking about the soliloquies in which the fourth wall was broken, but yeah, they were still in category, they were not out of category.
Andrea, are you still here? The example that I felt last week with the young influencer from Germany, her name is Alexia, 1.4 million followers, but she's doing these 15-second clips on TikTok, which is like Instagram. And then companies now give her things to wear, so she makes money. So she's selling herself, she's sold out, she's kaput. I think for me, to open into the commercial sector also means you will be selling, marketing differently, and then it's no longer underground. I mean, how do you feel about reaching wider audiences with this still experimental, I think, setup? Is it possible?
Yeah, I think it's possible as long as you start from a common ground, from something that the audiences are accustomed to, and in our case that would be emotion-oriented performance, realism, and so on. So combining what the audience already knows with new levels of performance might be a first start. So we didn't have experimental artists coming to see the performance. We had normal people who were often in the same situation as the characters and who could identify and potentially empathize with them. And I think live streaming actually might be a way of reaching wider audiences. So telematics can have a role in that. So not necessarily experimental performance, but we can use live streaming to disseminate other theater performances.
I think that with telematics and other similar techniques, the concept of audience itself becomes much more fuzzy. I mean, we are not a classical theater with some number of chairs in front of a stage. With performance, with this performance, we already had 2 series of audience in 2 theaters. Maybe in another similar experiment, the streaming will go in the street. So I think the audience will become actually broader in a natural way. We don't have to put it as an objective.
And also we had a third kind of public audience, because it was a live stream on the internet.
Yeah.
And we had the public in Romania, public audience in Romania, audience in Spain, and also on the internet. It was a live stream.
Do we know how many people watched the stream?
The live stream 84, so we had 84 views during the live stream, and later on I think we reached like 500 or so.
More.
I wrote it down in the book. But it's interesting that the attention span of the audience was larger during the live stream than after the live stream. So I think that confirms what you said about the shared time of the performance, which is very important for the audience experience. Like, people watched it for only 5 minutes, that's the medium audience retention, after the event. And during the event, that was 3 times larger.
That is so strange.
Yeah.
Why does it have to be at the same time when I watch something?
But indeed, that's what the audience statistics show.
I think I had an answer. Please can translate, please.
And that was the problem. I will translate.
Cred că fenomenul se explică prin aceea că publicul era interesat de ceea ce se întâmplă aici, acum.
Yeah.
Fiindcă aici, acum este eu în fața
I
computerului.
think the phenomenon can be explained by the fact that the audience were interested in what was happening here and now.
Chiar dacă eu, ca spectator, sunt în fața unui
Even if
computer.
I, as a spectator, was in front of the computer.
Până la urmă, o specificitate a teatrului este viul.
In the end, the specificity of theater is liveness.
Dacă vedem ceva înregistrat, sigur că poate și aceea să fie o experiență teatrală.
If we see something recorded, of course, that can be a theatrical experience.
Dar senzația de viu dispare.
The sensation of something alive disappears.
Una dintre mizele noastre
One of our stakes
a fost această împletire.
Was this a melding?
În cele 17 reprezentații, spectatorii din Buzău
In the 17 performances, the audience in Buzău
vedeau doi oameni vii la 2 metri față de
could
ei
see two living people in front of them,
și alți 3 oameni
and
pe
other
un
3
ecran.
people on a screen.
Ceea ce era important erau că erau vii.
What was important was that they were live.
Yes. Tipul acesta de experiență combinată de tehnologie cu viul teatrului, cred că merită dezvoltat.
This type of combined experience between technology and the liveness of theater should be developed.
Interesting. Thank you. I mean, can I answer? I remember as a child, growing up as a child, every Saturday night we would watch a certain television show in my family. Every Saturday night at 8 o'clock. But now when I think about since the 80s and 90s and I have a video recorder, so my favorite television show is on Monday night, but I miss it, so I record it and I watch it on Tuesday. It doesn't matter to me. So I can always record it and watch it later. I don't have to watch the football game last night at 9 o'clock. I can watch it now on the platform. So we're used to platform shifts, no?
Yeah.
I think that's right, but to go back to football, which I think is really instructive here, millions and millions of people watch the football when the game is on.
I don't.
Well, and we don't have to, and that's true. We can watch, and sometimes I do the same with the rugby, so I might watch it later. But why do millions of people watch it when it's on, and far fewer people watch it later? We don't have a culture where we think, oh, I'm going to watch a football match this evening. I fancy the 1977 game between Bayern Munich, and we don't really do that. And I think this issue of consuming cultural production in actual time is just hugely pertinent, and I think it's to do with the commodification of experience. So you kind of enjoy that consumption collectively in the moment. I think there's something very what's that? It's this kind of mix of economics and pleasure in consuming in real time. But I might think some of all of this discussion comes back to issues and problematics and affordances of the story. Because you watch sport in real time to find out what happens and who's going to win, what happens and how does it happen. And you've raised this question here about mobilizing a story that may or may not be within a realist idiom. I think all of those modes of presentation are always mediated, they always operate according to conventions, but yes, you're telling a story that sort of comes across as actual. It's the thing that Lehman discovered in a way. Even within a post-dramatic culture, the dramatic never went away, and we remain interested in it. So we're interested in what happens, how it happens, understanding that in the present moment, and being able to tell and share stories. And that's where I find all of this work so interesting, because it's kind of still pressuring those phenomena.
Live theatre audiences are still it's the kind of market that that pay a lot of money to go to a theatre. They like for example, compare sales for Western theatre to the digital versions of Western theatres. It's much larger, much higher. It's because it's the thrill of live theatre. So if we go right back before we had all this digital stuff, like go to the Colosseum, so it attracted thousands of people because of the thrill of what is happening there, the gladiators killing each other. Why do you want to watch circus on a screen when you can go to a live circus and is the guy falling down from his trapeze or not? There's something, I think there's a thrill about live theatre, the actors, what could go wrong, there's so much that can go wrong, certainly in telematics, and because I experienced it myself, like yourself, going through 2 performances, which was the most nerve-wracking thing in my life, because so much can go wrong with technology on top of, like, you know, your live theatre actors, etc. And I think it's the thrill of live theatre will never die, but I think telematics can be also a way forward in creating something new, like a digital parallel performance, like you can call it many things, like the network performance, and also make it more accessible. But like you said, not many people watch the live stream afterwards. It is not as exciting, because at that moment in time, we know, and even the audiences should be aware, there's so much that can go wrong. If you ever Skype somebody, you know how many times you have to like redial and have to go back in. So there's so much that can go wrong, and I think this is the exciting thing, at combining this technology with live theatre. In the first instance, how it will develop, I don't know. This is something that we will discuss later on, I guess.
Thank you.
Think about the football match. I don't know how fun is it to watch the match after it finished, when you know the result. You know, there are 3 kinds, in fact: to go on the stadium to see live the match, to see recorded, or to see on TV. Live, or on TV live. Yeah.
Yes,
also,
I know, it's a drag. I have to tell my brothers and my friends not to tell me the result.
So my background is being a performer, like a dancer, singer, actor, and it's very much, I come from a traditional musical theatre and operatic background. So I started as a child performer in opera, and then kind of transcended into musical theatre and studied in London. And originally I'm from Germany, so I also emigrated to the UK eventually. Originally I just was a student, and then jobs started to happen. I met my husband, etc., and the rest is history. So about my project, so I'm coming from this traditional background of jazz hands 5, 6, 7, 8, and this is what I predominantly teach, is ballet, jazz and tap techniques, singing techniques, etc. at the university. However, obviously the challenges of changing the thinking of our students, and also challenging and stretching what our students should really learn about the industry and about theatre making in particular. And so I came across like the concept of telematics in about 2013. I had a holiday in Las Vegas in Nevada, and I met with Professor Michael Lugering from the University of Nevada in Las Vegas, UNLV, and we had a coffee and we just had a chat, and we casually said, like, okay, how can we make something work? How can we work together? How can we do a performance together, with our students and on both sides? So we started thinking about, we looked at some telematics kind of prototypes that were out there. We said, like, we can start with maybe a mobile phone or something like that, and our students can correspond with that. And eventually, like, something that was a little idea over coffee, 2 years later was a massive project that involved a lot of technologists and a lot of researchers in the digital kind of platforms, which then led me to writing an MA about the educational aspects for my students, what they've learned being suddenly in a not such a traditional kind of performance scenario, and also kind of a more virtual classroom, connecting to people that are 5,000 miles away with an 8-hour time difference, and creating new work together. So out of that, after the Masters, I decided I need to take this further, and I'm really interested to do another project, which I did in 2017, which was a second performance, this time with Los Angeles, the studio school in Los Angeles, who also run degree programs in dance and musical theatre. And out of that, I'm starting with the first slide. Out of my 2 projects, which I'll now show you a little bit later, there were so many curious questions. Obviously, like yourselves and what previous speakers have said today, it was all about the space and spatiality and latency, how to make the latency work, etc. Audience, of course, like how do we make this palatable for the audience, so it's not just experimental but also like an emotional experience. And the other observation that I particularly made in the first project was the emotional connection. So sorry about your earlier notion about making a breakdown. So mine all became about the emotional connection between performers, because one thing that was really significant for me was an audience member after my first performance stood up. His name is Tom Clark, and he's a renowned theatre practitioner director, and he also goes on peace talks to Gaza. He actually is a correspondent to talk to the people in dangerous situations and trying to make peace between countries that have a lot of wars going on. And he stood up and tears were streaming down his face, and he said, like, what your students just done really, really touched me. And this is kind of, for him it was like the history in theatre making. He has not seen anything like it before. And also all of our performers were in tears afterwards. They found it an emotional experience. And in the first experience, our performers never met. So we only, over 2 years, devised and designed and created a piece all about time through the screen, nothing else, so they never met. And the second one, it was a complete different experience. I did a very low-tech, very quick, with like minimum rehearsal time kind of project with LA, where the performers actually, where we created a piece in the studio, and my students went over with me to LA and we created in the studio, and then as we came back we put it in front of the screen. So 2 total different experiences. So these are kind of the questions that I'm trying to answer. I haven't got the answers today, of course, because these are the answers I'm trying to find towards my PhD. And it's kind of like triggering emotional connection. So the difficulty is obviously, like when I turn my back to you now and I'm talking to a screen and you're my audience, yeah, I don't see anything. So obviously we need to keep the audiences engaged. So we obviously tried with different angles and making it more immersive. But also, like, how does this emotional connection between actors read? How can we make that work? And like, kind of like, what is a kind of an artistic viable kind of performance? There's obviously a little bit of commercial factor here again. And I want to like see how, like, does it affect like audiences in real time, in the real space and online? And how can we obviously challenge, I mean, this is kind of the question got answered today. How can telematics performers challenge directors, choreographers, and musicians to create meaningful performances for stage and screen? So these are just very quickly aims. I'm going to whiz through that a little bit because I think I'm going to go a little bit further down the line to show you a little bit about my work. So maybe then we can have a little bit of more discussion later on, because I would be very, very interested to hear your views. Obviously, a couple of quotes here. So there's very little literature in the telematics field. I found hundreds of articles in my research for my master's and now for my PhD, but there's very little written about emotional connection. But when I was watching performances, I saw beautiful emotional connection. Also in Johannes, in your piece with the hands, that was one of the pieces actually I looked at before I'd written my proposal. And I really found that quite emotional, personally, and also how your performers connected. So this is kind of for me to analyze the work that is out there, and also your piece, the Tele-Encounters, etc. There is a lot of great connection there between actors, and obviously it's down also to the directors to get that out of their performers. So these are my projects that I've quickly introduced. So the first one was called Time Lapse, which was very high tech, and we used something called the Ultra Grid. This was developed in the Czech Republic, and the University of Nevada, they were sponsoring the project, so we contributed like something like £5,000, which was like 6,500 euros. So not a lot really in the grand scope of things, and they sent over their technologists and they hacked into our system at the college, which was quite scary. It looked like they were hacking into the White House. There were like hundreds of these green lines going through our computer system for 2 days. And what the Ultra Grid did, which was really, really significant, was reduce the latency. So the lag was just a slight echo, and the picture was crystal clear once we got it to work. It took a few days to get it to work, but once we connected, because we rehearsed via Skype before, it was a complete different game changer, and it was just an amazing experience. It was literally, there was no delay. We actually managed to sing a song together, and there was only a slight echo in the end, which was really rather breathtaking. We tried to choreograph at Pas de Deux together, and we also, without lifts, naturally, needless to say, and we tried to incorporate everything about time. So for example, there's this game in America that I play called Time Bomb, where people throwing the time bomb like a ball game, and the last person to catch, is then gone. And we did that, actually we had 2 time bombs in either end, and we were trying to throw and catch, and it kind of worked, obviously with a little bit of trickery of the theatre world. The second one was very low tech. It was literally this laptop behind the screen, a camera in the screen, connected to the screen, and Skype. But it worked, somehow it worked. It was very scary, and with this project it was, this was more all about, the whole theme was about what would happen if we are off the grid. What would happen if all of the technology breaks down and one day we have nothing? And what would happen at the same time if we were not allowed to travel anymore, like so many times in Romania before 1989, etc. So what would happen? The whole world shuts down, there's no more communication between countries, and there's no more travel. So that was the script that I wrote. And we created it, like my dancers and performers were in the studio, they found an old computer, and they tried to make it to work, and the screen went frizzy, and then suddenly, boom, we had a signal, and suddenly the other side appears, so the dancers in LA. And we played a little bit with, we used traditional musical theatre then, we used like West Side Story, the Jets and the Sharks, like the theme to begin with, like throwing and catching the movement, because actually the choreography really, really worked. Then towards the end we built up that 2 protagonists, so a male protagonist on our side, female on the other side. They fell in love through the screen. It was the only time they ever made a connection to the outside world. And then in the end, like when they're just about to connect, our performers started building walls, and we tried to simulate, you know, like it wasn't boats, like, you know, now the immigration coming from Syria, we assimilated boats as like in physical theatre on the floor on both sides, so that the 2 lovers are trying to get across, but they'll never meet, and then everything goes dead and there's a blackout. So it's a little bit kind of dramatic story behind that. So the Ultra Grid, just quickly for those of you who are tech interested, and I'm just going to bring this up quickly, it just gives you a little bit of background information, but if you're really interested in that, just go on the website Ultra Grid. If you Google that, then you get all the specs. But I highly recommend it if you want to do a really high-tech project, because it really, really worked. But you need to have people who are really experienced, and that is a very complicated and long-winded and costly eventually to set up. So details. I'm just gonna go and switch my screen over here. So there's a few pictures of time-lapse. So this is on a website we created. Hope you can see a little bit. This is actually what Vegas created. So they created a few images here. So you can see a little bit more images here like that they have taken in their studio, and there's an image in our studio in Western. So there's a lot of that in that one, and also with time-lapse. The only other thing I'm going to show you that's still a little bit on Facebook. This is how we worked with the first piece, time-lapse, over the 2 years. So a little bit of footage. If you want to follow us on the Facebook page here. But I wanted to show you the overlapping images. So this is also we experiment. We had several audiences for that one. We had the live theatre audiences in Las Vegas and in Western, and we had also a cinema audience, because they were experimenting having 2 parallel screens. So obviously in our audience only saw 1 screen, like here, and then our actors in the live space, and then there was a cinema audience, about 250 people in the cinema, and they saw Western here and UNLV here. So they saw them parallel looking out to the audience. So we had an experiment with that. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. Any questions? Thank you very much for listening.
There's a microphone. I have a question. So the performer in the video, the one that danced with the real performer, was it performing live, or was it?
Yes, yeah, this was all live, yeah. This was a live stream. The live stream is still available, and this is all on website here. You can see here, digital dancing, it's a wixsite.com, UCW and Rel School, and there's a link to a live stream here. and that's still working. That's the actual performance, but only on our side. So that one is only recorded on our side. And in Western, you can all watch the performance still. It's on Vimeo. There's a link here somewhere. If not, I can send Marina the link if she wants to pass that on. Then there's a link actually, but you see what the cinema performance saw, 2 parallel screens. And that's there. But all of these were live, and we had live audiences. So both of our projects we performed twice. We always did a 4 p.m. performance for us, which was an 8 a.m. performance in America. LA is also 8 hours back. And then we did an 8 a.m. performance in the UK, which was 12 p.m. midnight, 12 a.m. sorry, midnight for America. So this is also like the time difference is obviously quite drastic performing with a country like that, but that made it also really attractive, but problematic with rehearsals. So we normally rehearse at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, UK time, 8 a.m. like America time.
Yeah, I have a question. Did your audiences question the live nature of the event? Because in our case that happened. People thought that everything was pre-recorded. Some people did comment that after the performance.
I think it's because we announced it that this is going live, and also like on our, like particularly working with UNLV, that was so good with advertising it. I made loads and loads of trailers, and we had all these trailers out to our invited audiences, so they were kind of informed this is happening now. And myself and my co-director, we introduced the piece, what's going to happen before, because we said anything can happen, the whole technology can go down. So we just warned our audiences about that.
I mean, we warned them as well before every performance, and still they believed that it might not be real, so they mistrusted technology. That's what says as well. Yeah. So I came across that reading about other telematic practitioners as well. People mistrust the liveness of the event.
Absolutely. But that's like what we said earlier, that's the beauty of it. I don't know where this is going, but I personally, as a creator, I found it fascinating, because I'm happiest when you put me in a room with a bunch of people and I can, just create something. But then also involving technology and making it complicated is a lovely challenge. And, the end product, both products we were as creators very, very proud of, and I'm sure you are as well with this, because you're putting everything into it. Question is, where is it going? I believe that all these things like Tele-Encounters will be pioneers for maybe a genre. It might be more of a niche market genre eventually. To make it high tech and make it work in the commercial world, you would have to invest probably millions and millions and millions to have that a live event every single night. But why not? I mean, like, it could be the next big thing, it could be nothing. So you don't know. Yes.
Going back to Andrea and Adu, what you said about how to place the audience, is it important to consider their angles of watching, and do you ever actually address the audience in the physical space directly, or do you ignore them? For example, if I'm sitting here and I see the dancer here, and then I have to look at the screen, it's difficult, isn't it?
Yes, so we were playing with angles. Our performers were constantly moving angles. And when there was something happening, so the dialogue did not necessarily always correspond to the screen, we had things happening in both studio spaces. So the audience actually live in the theatre got something out of that as well. So got kind of integrated. Sometimes the dialogue would be addressed like to here and going away, and the same was happening on the other side, all corresponding on the screen to what we did, and then we switched it.
Because I don't believe in emotion, so I have to question it, because in a sense, emotion is perhaps an aspect of the way energy is transmitted, or in terms of a story, how the story captures you with a movement. But in theater, often there are moments when the energy is because the actor also is directly, let's say, addressing an audience or doing a monologue, knowing the audience is now looking at my lips. When you have to screen, this all doesn't work, right?
Yeah, I agree. And this is like, this is why we were experimenting for a long time, how we can integrate the like both sides, always worried about the studio audiences to make this actually a viable experience for them, so they're not just watching two actors talking to a screen. So that is actually a viable performance for them, that they get kind of immersed into the piece.
When we are directing, I think, because we are thinking in twice at the same time, because we are composing the actor for the public, the audience, and in other rehearsal, I just see the projections. I think that you can pay attention at what you want. The direction is the art. The direction and the acting. But they have to concentrate the attention in the project. Even the project needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is it's also about the piece, isn't it? Like, because obviously you created your piece and the piece needs to be meaningful. Just very quickly, my next two projects. One piece, I'm going to work with a hip hop dancer from Mexico, just a single dancer in the UK. He emigrated about 5 years ago to the UK and is now an established dancer, worked with like Thriller Live and big shows. And with a dancer in Mexico, we're going to portray how his life has changed moving to the UK through a dance piece. So connecting to a performer in Mexico, and the next piece, which will be a much larger scale production, which might or might not be telematics, it's about Andy Warhol. Because Andy Warhol is actually a pioneer of, he would have been the Instagrammer, influencer of nowadays, because not just did he do a lot of pop art, for those of you who don't know, he made hours and hours of endless film. For example, filming his sleeping lover for 8 hours or something like that. And he used to go through rolls and rolls of film that is archived now in America, mainly in Pittsburgh, where he's from. So myself and some co-creators in LA were writing a script about Andy Warhol, so that might be a good one for telematics and putting pop art in, so putting art in it as well on top of it. So that's an idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Silvia. We're going to start with Alessandro Bergiano, who is the director of the CINETic Research Center Digital Interaction, the place where we're now. He also works here as a researcher in the MIT project, MET project, which aims to develop a theater therapy method with impact at neurochemical and neurocognitive level. He will present a very interesting project.
Very welcome here. I'm very happy to host this event at CINETic. Many thanks, Marina, for bringing me here. I'm very happy also because Marina was part of a directing class where I was teaching to, and it looks like she grew out to do really interesting stuff, like this organization, this conference. I will be presenting you one of the projects I've been working in the last time. It's a project combining documentary work and VR. So it's a project called Touch. It was financed by the Romanian Cultural Fund. And it was very good that it was a project which was financed for 2 years, which was very unusual at that time, and we hope they will still do, because this is one of the very important issues in Romania, that we don't have so much long-term financing for projects. The project in itself is a continuation of my interest regarding housing and general conditions for Roma people in Romania. In 2016, I've been doing a project in partnership with theater in Istanbul, and while we were working to find the theme, we got to the conclusion that it would be interesting to document and to do a play about Roma living in Turkey and in Romania. For me, it was a very strange process because at that time I was aware that there are Romas in Europe and especially in Romania and the Balkans, but I was not aware that there are Romas in Turkey. And then somehow a very, let's say, in one part sad but also very interesting process started for me, making interviews in different communities. So my presentation will be a bit, or most part of my presentation will be showing you pictures. I will be showing you pictures taken out from different locations. We've been doing interviews and telling you about the communities we have been working with or documenting. And then I will pass to the part where I will be saying you how we choose to reflect those things into VR and which were for me personally and for us as a team the challenges in doing this. So one of the first things which you probably know, or maybe you don't know, but the reason why probably Marina invited me to present here this project is because nowadays Roma communities are part of a migrational process. A migrational process which is of course started thousands of years ago, but at some moment it was about to stop in most of the places, but in Romania, especially in the last 10 years, grew more and more. So I think this situation of a population which stopped migrating and started migrating again is a very particular one, and it brings up a lot of very strange situation, which at least in my part is very hard to really fully understand them. Okay, so when we started documenting for the first part of the project, in the part where we were reading, basically, we found out that there is a population of Roma people called Horahai, which is very much of Turkish heritage. They are Muslims. They live in Romania as well as in other neighboring countries like Bosnia, Bulgaria, Albania, and so on, and of course in Turkey. So we decided to try to make some cross interviews between these people from Babadag and from some people in various locations in Romania, and to see if they're, let's say, connecting dots or connecting things. So we have been doing interviews at different events, like for instance at El-Delezi, which is a Muslim celebration. It's a celebration for the dead people in spring. So here we see some kids which are gathered around a grave in Babadag cemetery. It's very interesting to see that also people who are more of a status, but also people who are very poor are participating at this yearly gathering. And it's a moment when the family, like you see, they bring food and stuff to the dead and they communicate somehow with the families. So this Babadag community, it's a very segregated community. It's a community which was settled in Babadag in the late 50s. It's very hard to get a history of the community because even nowadays most of the people from the community don't know how to read and write. So we are basically based only on oral stories. The oral story says that a mayor of this town was of Roma origin, and he allowed some families, like 3 families of Roma people, to establish their place in Babadag. They camped basically in quite like on the side of the town. It's the part where they are still mainly living. And during communist time, most of them were still split between a lot of agricultural work in the state CAPs, like common property, and doing a lot of petty works or selling stuff in the area. So it was still a community which was very much traveling. The travel is very much in the family of everybody. So if you talk with every family, everybody who is like a grandfather says that he was born in a tent and that their family just stopped migrating in 60s or 70s. So nowadays the community is very diverse. There are a lot of houses like this, which are not huge, but they are new, and on the inside they can look like this. So you see a huge pile of blankets, but this is the actually main room, and actually the houses, most of the part of the house looks like this. And it's only one room which is actually somehow furnished. They live in very like families. The communities are very specially organized. So of course they are very patriarchal, and they have a huge amount of rules regarding property, celebrations and everything. This is not a family, this is like guys from the neighborhood which are gathered in a yard. And this is one of the families which was one of the first to, let's say, be more open in talking with us. So their house is a lot bigger than the one you previously saw, and actually this guy was the first one to ask unequivocally the question, what do you do for a living? So their response was begging, and actually they are going in Sweden to beg. And you should know that actually Babadag, it's a town which obviously is not providing any type of work for them. So they are at present, they are like after 89, work in agriculture was closed. After 89, all the local factories were closed, and also they got into, because they were doing still the commerce, but in early 2000, most of the stuff they were selling stopped being of interest because it was cheaper and accessible even in villages. There are few of them which are still going and selling stuff in villages, but most of them quit. And what they are doing most now, the ones which are not getting their money from begging, is buying ships and selling them to some local big agricultural enterprise to be butchered and so on. So they are basically dealers of ships, like the animal. Then another thing which is very interesting is that sometimes in a lot of the families, because it's mostly nowadays parents which go outside of Babadag to work. Sometimes they could be going to work, sometimes they could be going just to beg, and sometimes the kids stay at home alone or in the care of only one person, which can be 80 years old and blind. So this is a wedding. This is something they're very proud of, because it's they were not allowed to go in the part where usually Romanian people are having their weddings in Babadag. So this was somehow like the community investment to have this nice saloon to do the wedding. One thing which you can see is that basically everybody is seated. This is very much connected with their type of relationship. So during a wedding, each family will come out of the table and dance by themselves, and then the next family will be coming. No families mingle, because you cannot have a man going close to a woman which is not relative to them. At the weddings, everybody is really coming, even the very poor ones. This is in the yard. And generally, this is the type of relationship they have with the authorities. There are many legal houses built in Babadag, but only the Romas one gets to be demolished if they don't have permit. Then we went to Stockholm, where we've been talking with a lot of the people which we already knew from Babadag. And sometimes they get involved in some charity stuff, like this event done by a church, which is one of the very few to get involved in working with them. So they provide a night shelter, and sometimes they organize these kind of events trying to get money for the shelters to work. We have been doing also interviews with Roma locals, people which are of Roma origin and were born into Sweden since late 19th century. And what they were explaining, there are a lot of amazing Roma militants in Sweden, like Fred Tycoon and his family, or many others who were very much welcoming us, and they are sometimes very much involved also in helping newer days immigrants. And one thing which he told us is that he was born in a trailer, because at that time Roma people were not allowed to be actually living in towns. This was in the 40s, and then that only in the 50s Roma people started being accepted in towns in Sweden. And it was very strange to see with him things like this picture where actually you have now trailers where Roma people are living in Sweden, which of course are Roma coming from mainly Romania, but maybe also from Bulgaria and other places. The thing which was most scary for me was that, of course, I've read a lot of books about Roma people, and things which are, let's say, so somehow appear like history, where you think, okay, I've read this happened like in the 15th century, that Roma people would have secret names or would hide where they are coming from, or would have different identities for officials and for the group. Actually, it was very obvious after we were doing the interviews that it's still very real for them, and they need to use those strategies also in nowadays in order to deal with our society. So basically, when we've got into this camp, which was empty, like it was nobody there. At the moment, one guy came. He was crazy. He was very fearful. When we started talking to him in Romania, he got a little bit more relaxed, and then he basically was lying us about where he is coming from in different ways and different manners, trying to make us really don't understand and don't know where he is coming from. This is from Istanbul. This is how not very typical, a bit more poor Roma neighborhood looks like. Izi Pasha. This is a neighborhood which was basically demolished and made these residential houses, which were at the beginning supposed to be for migrants from Syria, but they didn't afford it, I don't know how. These are migrants, these are refugees of war, of Dom origin in East Syria. They are living in tents. So, this is Napoli, very beautiful city now, and Rome. This is also Napoli. This is a place where they were allowed to be a theater after a fire, which seems that it was put to their barracks because people wanted to chase them away. This is Rome, and these are the experiences. So basically, we've been doing 5 experiences. One of the challenges, and with this I'm going to end. One of the challenges which I had doing the experiences was how you can tell the story of some people with which I deeply empathize, but which I know that if I present them in a documentary way and in a direct way, they will be judged as lazy, as dirty, and as uneducated. So this was the starting point from which we built the 5 experiences, which of course we tried very much to put somehow the people inside the experience of living in those impoverished conditions, and also to try to provide some information about the background of the whole history. So thank you. And at the end it's the crew, and thank you.
Just asking, what kind of relations has the Horagani with the Muslim community in Babadag?
It's a complex relation of a big love and of some hate. So somehow the Horahai community is, and that was the main reason why we have extensively researched and worked and somehow got into a lot of relations with them, is because they are discriminated by the Muslims, they are discriminated by the Christians, they are discriminated by the Roma, they are discriminated by the local authorities. Nobody likes them. They are somehow completely pushed out of society by everybody. So the relationship is that if you go at the very beautiful mosque, I was about to say synagogue, I'm sorry, or no, at the mosque, which is one of actually very important Islam culture heritage sites in Romania, because it's very old and also very beautiful. If you talk to the Hoja, he hates them. There are actually 4 Hojas. One is from Istanbul, and he hates them the most, and the other ones, depending on how local they are, they're understanding more what is about. So basically, the Hoja, which is coming from Istanbul, completely doesn't understand why they are coming to the mosque, because they don't understand Arabic. They don't understand the words of the Prophet. They can't read the Quran. They barely speak a few Turkish sentences because they are Horahai. They are not Turkish. They keep very much some of the traditions, some of the Muslim traditions, but kids are not taking their shoes off when they get into the mosque. So he would very much be preferring them to do not come at the mosque, but they are still performing. So every 3 years, only one imam comes from Istanbul and is doing the circumcision in order to get the confirmation into the religion, and yeah, so.
They do circumcision.
Most of them do the circumcision. Most of them, at least, say that they don't eat pork meat, and most of them, it's not regular for them to eat pork meat. They have some. Everybody has something of Muslim religion in their house. And actually, what I think is very interesting is that Islam is very much into their daily life, but not so much into the written word. But they also have things which they would be saying to each other, which are very much of, let's say, peaceful Islamic inspiration. Like,
And with the Roma community.
One of the experiences we had, so basically they don't consider themselves, if you ask them what they are, they would be saying that they are Turkish, which is one of the things which most of the mayors hate. So they say that, we are the village with the biggest Turkish population, but it's not true. They are not Turkish. They are gypsies.
How do you know?
This is what the mayor is telling, or at least the mayor which I was talking to. And then there are different cultures of Roma in Babada. They don't mingle together. So you have the Horahai group, but you could have also called Rush or whatever. And then the most interesting story happened. So one of the guys was traveling with us in Sweden, and to show us the places and the family and everybody. And when we saw the camp, the one which you saw in the pictures, he said, "Oh my God, we can't go there. It's very dangerous." Why? Because they are gypsies, And how you recognize gypsies? They are dirty, they have long hair, they dress in this weird way, and he was basically calling up all the stereotypes which our societies have on Roma people. And one of the experiences we have been doing, one of the VR experiences actually is him saying this hate speech while we see his wedding, when it's an interesting mixture to see that of course he's somehow part of the culture but somehow still very much out and hating it.
Can we see the work?
The work?
I mean, what I wonder is, you spoke so eloquently about the field work and the production, but the outcome is a gamified VR.
So there are one of them is a gamified experience where.
What does that mean?
It means that you are on a bicycle, riding a bicycle in a scanned Stockholm, and you need to get from the floor some bottles, like plastic bottles, which is what he was doing, and then you get into a different space after you pick up all the bottles and you have a lot of gold covering you, and actually you are in jail, and in that room you hear his story, which is that while he was going with his bike on the streets of Stockholm, he was grabbed by a police because somebody accused him of stealing the bike because the bicycle was pink and the bicycle was a girl bicycle and it didn't suit him, and so on, so on. So you get in a kind of labyrinth which he is telling about. So this is one type of experience. Another one is, let's say, an interactive movie where you are in a classroom and you can navigate from one child to another and you hear their thoughts, which are in Romanian, like I want a Barbie doll or I don't know. And then there is a child which speaks Romani in the last band, because that's the cliche about being a Romani child.
It's shocking to me to actually now reflect on that we have multiple segregated minorities within a European context where we have migration as well as refugees. And the refugee experience that I saw on the border of Mexico and Texas was that people coming from Central America do not plan to go back, but actually bring everything with them but what they have on their back. And it's very difficult to imagine where they're going actually.
So one thing which is
the Roma have a history, right? They have actually a generational history of.
They have a generational, let's say, set history, which basically in all the places we have been, the way they are doing is directly and only connected with how they are welcomed there. If they are welcomed and if they are let be, they thrive, even if in long time, even if starting in conditions which we would be considered unimaginable to live. But if they are chased away either with bulldozers or fire, either if with economical situations, because they are very much put into a huge pressure from economical situations, and this is really pushing them away. And in Napoli, we've been talking with a community which actually refused us to make photos or to interview them. So they were chased out of one of the camps, because that's how they are called in Italy, camps. And one of those camps, which is very big, was shut down, and everybody was forced basically with the bulldozers to leave, and they were living like this for more than 1 year, 1 year and a half, with changing actually the location where they are living every between 2 weeks and 2 months. They have never been in one place longer than 2 months. And we speak about a group of people which are like 300 people with kids, with families, with and journey. They get into places where, of course, there is no access to water, no access to electricity, no access to anything. One of the things which made me very happy about VR had as a consequence also making me very sad. So even if they were in display for 1 week, I think we had about 300 or 400 viewers, because actually VR, you need to have you need to have one guy for each guy who is watching, and one equipment dedicated for each guy who is watching. Of course, it's a very powerful experience. It was somehow part of our work, the way we promoted the event in Bucharest, which was a VR showcase. We didn't say anything about what's the showcase. So it was very interesting to see that we had, like, half of the people would be people who would be wanting to spend the night at the mall with their girlfriend, and after they would be seeing the first experience, they would be asking, "Oh, what's that? It's Roma. What's this?" And most of the people would be, let's say, I would consider that they would be reacting very well, because most of them would watch most of the experiences. There were some people which, of course, after they would be asking where did we have the money from and stuff like this. Is it a project? Which somehow shows that people don't think that somebody would do work or expose Roma people in such a way outside of having a European project. And then we've been showing in some of the communities, we've been showing them in Stockholm at the Salvation Army, which was a partner for the project, and we tried to have also people from the community, also in Napoli at some social events, let's say, social events in social networking groups, and it was shown also at Mirage Festival in France, and also at INTERNETic Festival in Bucharest. And if we'll have energy, we'll show it more. But somehow I have to tell that I'm very sad, because it's a huge amount of work, but it's very hard to make it available to the audience in VR. But we plan also to do a documentary at the moment with the material we show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Game design and analog game prototyping here at UNATC I.L.Caragiale. She has a BA in script writing and an MA in playwriting.
I am Iana Vasile. So today I will talk about high-tech theater and video games. I am using for the first time this, more precisely about interactive dramaturgies and cyber dramas. First of all, I want to begin with a foreword, because in order to understand and to explore new media and multimedia language in performance, we have to know that the form of present-day theater has not always been the same. So some important important changes happened after the Industrial Revolution that marked the appearance of science fiction, and mankind became aware of the human condition in relation to mechanical and analog technologies. So I will present some of the important concepts, analog concepts in theater, like Gesamtkunstwerk, that implied syncretism, combining all the arts together in a single performance. Also, Gesamtkunstwerk implied immersion, because Richard Wagner was the first that he turned off the lights in the audience hall. And these ideas favored the appearance of multimedia, and after that, new media. Another analog concept important in theater is the shadow theater, that implied virtuality, that we can translate as an illusion of movement. And these ideas also favor the appearance of comics, and after that of cinema. And the last one is the avant-garde, that implied virtual actors, audience participation, actors improvisation, and fragmentation of art. So I think these concepts we can also find in the digital era, because digital era means the transition from analog to digital in many activities, including arts. So in this context, we introduced technologies on the stage. For example, we had and we have video images on the stage. And also in this situation, we need a new dramatic structure. So what is digital medium? What is digital? We can say about the digital medium that is a meta medium, able to reproduce other mediums by its capacity of simulation. Digital medium can be also a new form of representation that implies interaction, participation, navigation, and immersion. So in this context, we have new perspective of the audience and theater creation, like virtual and immaterial scenes, virtual actors or avatars, cyber theater, telematic theater, and of course audience participation, interactive dramaturgies, and other technologies like VR and AR. So we can say that we have a high-tech theater, or we can call it a hybrid theater, because we combine live and real theater with virtual representations. That means we link present with absence, or material with immaterial. Before going forward on this idea, I want to stop for the first definition of virtuality that is linked with the optical physics. Virtuality is practically a virtual image obtained in an optic system at the light extension intersection that cannot be caught on the screen. So this concept has grown and has been used with other meanings after that. So for example, optical and shadow theater, as I mentioned before. And in this situation, the VR pioneer Jan Rainier said about virtual reality that it's all about illusion. It's about computer graphics in the theater of the mind. It's about the use of technology to convince yourself that you are in another reality. So virtual reality is where the computer disappears and you became the ghost in the machine. The computer retreats behind the scenes and becomes invisible. So what is the relationship between virtual reality and theater? Steve Dixon said that theater has always been the will to virtuality. Theater is always already a simulation. It stands for something outside of itself. Theater is the inauthentic masquerading as the authentic, the unreal posited as the real. The basic paradigm is the same as in virtual systems. So in this context, we have new challenges in high-tech theater, or challenges in high-tech theater, because we introduced technologies and on the stage, and that means we have to build or to give new temporal and spatial dimensions, starting with scenography, dramaturgy, and after that, new ways of viewing performances. So a potential solution is to use or to research digital storytelling, that simply put is telling stories with technologies, like Brian Alexander said. Digital storytelling is also known as interactive dramaturgy, hypertextual narrative, or cyberdrama, because it includes multiple digital platforms. And covers a wide range of digital narratives like video games, applications, vlogs, AR or VR technologies. I can say that in digital stories we can find digital medium properties, because digital stories are interactive. We participate in the story, so users interact and affect the story with their decisions. Also, we have the multilinearity, because digital stories are branching stories with alternative plots, and then it goes by the user with them. So we have also the 3D characteristic, because digital stories are navigable stories. It's like a branching story, it's like a map with an intersection, and in this context the elements of the story must be mapped in specific places, giving meaningful experience to the users. Of course, the 3D is linked with the circularity, because the possibility of going back and forward forever in the decision tree causes the loop of the story, and this loop must not affect the story progress. As I said before, digital stories are fragmented, because interactivity and navigability of the story also causes this fragmentation. They are functioning on the cognitive gap principle, or because the user can order the action sequentially, and at the end he may connect it at the end. And the last one is the immersion, because digital stories are engaging stories, and all the other characteristics mentioned before, and other elements like interface, sounds, graphics, feedbacks would give users the feeling of presence within the experience. Basically, they will feel mentally and corporally connected to the virtual reality. So, I think these concepts and structures find the best places in video games, because they are interactive, they are immersive, they are participatory, and so on. Video games are also the storytelling of the 21st century, and we can say that video games and theater have a lot in common. I will mention some of them, like suspension of disbelief, conflict, action, rules, etc., etc. So this table is comparing some elements in common between theater and video game. As I said, the suspension of disbelief can be translated in video game as assuming a role and the rules of the game. Of course, in theater we have the dramaturgy, that is very important, that we can translate it in the video game as conflict, evolution, and resolution. Also, theater is about action and conflicts, that we can translate it in video game as gameplay. And so on and so on, but the last one is also very important in theater and in other arts. It's the imitation, that can be translated in video game as reality simulation. Of course, games and theater are not the same, but they share the same roots, because theater is one of Roger Quelois play activity categories. It's called mimicry, and it means game of pretending. The others are Aiden, competitive games like chess, and Illing's perception games. So I can conclude that with the fact that digital medium is a combination of theater and narrative structures. We can find possible narrative improvements by looking at the game structures. And don't forget that playing a game is interacting with a representative universe, a space of possibilities with narrative dimensions, as Eric Zimmerman said. So thank you very much, and I don't know.
There are questions?
Thank you. I have a question that I think consolidated quite a lot of the discussion today, which is the distinction between arranging these things for participants who do stuff, or arranging them for spectators who watch stuff. And I know that you can be both, or you can have systems that facilitate both. But do you kind of observe one thing predominating over the other, and do you think that the game paradigm is, I mean, it seems to be much more to do with the user and the participant, although I know that my son, for instance, watches other people play games, so there is a spectator function. But how do you sort of play out this distinction between the spectator and the participant?
Okay. So you talk about that theater is about viewing and only viewing, not
Well, you might say
participating.
that. I mean, in that table you put up, and I know it's not that straightforward, but an obvious, on the face of it, distinction is between the organisation of stuff for audiences and in games, the organisation of things that people will themselves do as agents.
Okay. First of all, there were some experiments in theater, like VR theater, VR performances, and they had to deal with this kind of participating in audience participating in the audience in the theater, not creation, but in the spectacle. So it's a problem, yes, because as Alex Berceanu said before, for one single viewer, you have to have another guy to instruct this viewer. So it's an administrative problem, I guess. But also on the other part of video games, there are some tendencies in nowadays, like making video game walkthrough, and practically you can play, but you can play indirectly the game through this video that's walking through the gameplay. So I don't know, it's a good answer for the problem.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you. Armine is a collaborator of mine and a friend. We've been working together since 2011, I think, since we were students at the same time. She's both an actress and a film director, and she's going to talk about a project that we did together 3 or 4 years ago, I think. She's currently studying towards a PhD at the Film University here at UNATC.
So my name is Armine. This is an Armenian name. I come from a mixed family, Armenian-Romanian. So in a way, this matches really good with migration. Number 30, Poparusu Street. In a way, I think it was your first telematic project in Romania, right?
Yeah.
It was a baby project in comparison to what she's doing now. And I'm saying this because the main telematic device was the phone. This was definitely the first telematic project I worked on, and the first performance one-to-one. So for me as an actress, this was the most difficult part. I wasn't used to be a performer, so to speak. I was used to a defined script. I used to play in traditional plays where improvising was only at the rehearsing level, not, you know, improvising on the way. And the whole performance being one-to-one was based on dialogue. So I had to shift my speech according to what the other person was saying. There was some important plot points though. Because I am coming from a mixed family, Marina was very generous and thought of, let's write the script together based on our histories, our family's history. So we made up this character called Arșa Luis. This is the name of my great-grandmother from my father's side, who was an Armenian genocide refugee. Let me explain just a little bit the history of the Armenian diaspora here in Romania, just to make a context. In Romania, we find the oldest Armenian diaspora in the world. The first proof of Armenian presence here in Romanian territories is dated back in the 11th century. The second wave of migration took place in the 16th century when Ani, the capital of the Armenian Empire, called Cilicia, the capital fell in front of the Tatars. So the Armenians fled through Crimea, they went to Galicia and eventually ended up in Moldavia and then crossed the mountains, the Carpathians, and settled in Transylvania. So here in Romania, we find monasteries and Orthodox monasteries and Catholic churches 500 years old, Armenian ones. Unfortunately, this diaspora does not speak the language anymore because being so old, as you can imagine, especially the Transylvania one, it was very hard for them to keep the language in an Austro-Hungarian empire. So they had to learn Hungarian, some had to learn Romanian to communicate with the Romanian population in the Hungarian Empire. So they lost the language, and the last Armenian school in Transylvania closed in the 18th century. My wave of migration, so to speak, my family was part of the last but one wave of migration, and starting in 1890 and finishing, let's say, in 1930. So this 4-decade wave of migration happened because of the persecutions of the Turks against, not only against the Armenians, but against all ethnic and religious minorities in Anatolia. So these persecutions started in 1890, and as you may know, in the First World War, the actual official persecution happened, and this is what we call the Armenian genocide. It was not only an Armenian, it was a Greek genocide, and I think the most, I can't say important anymore, but I believe, although I'm Armenian, I can say that the most tragic one is the Assyrian genocide. Because, okay, Armenians were halved, so we were 3 million, then we were 1.5 million. But the Assyrians were, I don't know, maybe 80% of the population was decimated in Anatolia. And Romania was the first country to receive Armenian refugees because of the old diaspora that was already here. So my father's ancestors came and settled in Romania. And our character, Arșa Luis, had the same story. the main plot points we had in the script that I, as a performer, had to be careful to spot on, despite any other roads the dialogue may take us to. These points were the Armenian genocide, the First World War, both worldwide, so it wasn't focused only in Romanian history. We were trying to make an educational performance in a way, because we were talking about the Two Worlds War, we were talking about interwar period, we were talking about communism and the revolution, the 89 revolution. So you had the falling of the communism, and the end of the dialogue was Arșa, this character, being confused whether to come back to Romania or not. The whole over the phone thing was caused by this condition we put the audience in. So the condition was, the audience was supposed to be a possible tenant of the last room of my family house. Marina would send them an email, so they would, see the performance over the internet, or I don't know, in a leaflet. They would want to make a reservation. They would send an email. Marina would answer, and Marina would, begin the game. If you want to be in this performance, you have to play a role. So your role is to be a possible tenant, and you will talk over the phone with the owner of this house, who was Arșa, a 25-year-old student studying in New York. So a Romanian, Armenian woman studying in New York, film. So this was my character. I was just over.
And for you.
Yeah, but I studied in London. I know my accent is slightly American, but I studied in London. And the whole telematic thing was, let me tell you, the making of this thing. I wasn't in New York. I was 3 rooms over the left in a kitchen, trying to not speak that loud, so in order, for the audience to not hear me. And sometimes we had issues with the dog, or I don't know, a police car or something, because the audience can hear it over the phone and you're in reality at the same time. So there were some production issues, but the sincere part of this of the performance was also the memories of childhood, because this last room was the room in which this character, Arșa, was playing when she was a child. So the possible tenant would open the door, and then he would be overwhelmed of this universe filled with we had everything, like toys, musical notes, wardrobes, everything. Like we had flip-flops hanging out from the ceiling. So it was like an entire universe, and this person would go into this labyrinth, and he or she would ask me questions. So at the same time, I had to answer the questions and keep in mind the 5 plot points I was supposed to talk about. And in the end, I would ask this person to give me some advice for me whether to come or not to come in Romania, back to Romania. And another interesting thing was that sometimes we had 1 person or 2 people, and when we had 2 people, they would learn things about one another, because I was also asking them questions about their family, about their ancestors, what they know about communism, what they know about the revolution, and many of them started telling stories that the other person didn't know. So it was also educational, but also learning something new about oneself. And it was a very nice experience, and I thank Marina for it, because it was also not only an acting experience, but also a script writing, development, and I don't know, she was a guru in these telematic thing. But there were also one disadvantage, a part of the production issues, that I wasn't able to perform more than 2 or 3 hours per day. We tried to have headphones or talk on speaker mode, but the audience would sense this detachment. They would, I mean, they almost, I think all of them were like not understanding everything I was saying. They sensed I'm not, 100% there. So I had to talk over the phone like old-fashioned way, and I had headaches. So after 3 hours, I would get migraines, and yeah, I think that was the only true problem I had as a performer. Thank you very much, and I'm honored to be here with you, a true telematic performance and players.
If you have questions for Armin? Yeah.
Just as out of interest, I was thinking earlier, wouldn't it be great to do, to use the tricks of theatre and media to make it look as though someone is actually over there in the States or wherever, and then at some point they're going to walk into the room, and you think, oh, but you could have done that. Did you do that? If you're like 3 doors down the corridor, did you exploit the opportunity of actually appearing in person?
And in the end, so every person in the public was allowed to see me. But in the end, so the performance would end and we would see each other and talk, and there were some interesting feedback, especially with I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but with older men that wanted to, take me out on a date. And then when they saw me, they were like, I thought you were older. I was like, I said I'm 25. Yeah, but your voice was like, yeah. So we had feedbacks like that. There was also one performance that wasn't that successful with a child. He was an 11-year-old child who got bored very quickly. So we had to end it, and it was pretty sad because he was very clever, and when I tried to discuss about history and so forth, I asked him about Hitler, for example, because I wanted to talk about Stalin, and I was like, okay, he doesn't know anything about Russia and stuff. Okay, let me ask him about Hitler. He was like, yeah, I know he's a bad man, and that's it. And I realized, how can I explain to him about Armenians and stuff like that. So he met me as well, but we didn't have that much of a dialogue. We also had another problem with panic attacks. One of my classmates, so she knew me, she knew Marina, and when she got into the childhood labyrinth, she had a panic attack, and she wanted Marina with her. Although she knew everything, and she knew me, and she knew I was there, and so yeah. People got to know me in the end.
Just want to thank you. I mean, just want to thank you because also I think these symposia allow us to learn about one another, and we haven't heard maybe as much from our friends in Murcia and Portugal in terms of also the way you look at migration in your local or in your national context. And hearing about the Armenian family story, I was going to criticize Professor Kivu publicly, but I've done it over lunch. He spoke about minorities in Romania, and he mentioned Jews and Germans, but he didn't mention the Roma, and he didn't mention the Armenians. And I think it's interesting that there is a diaspora in Transylvania, and that you were able to actually build this into a telematic plot, and I really appreciate the way this was, you call it a one-on-one, because this was a performance model that emerged also only in the last 20 years or so, I think, that you go in and you meet someone alone, but it was done to the phone. But they were in this room that you had equipped with the elements of the historical memory.
Photographs with the family as well, and in the end they would find a handycam camera I shot my last memory in that place on. So that was an interesting thing Marina wanted us to put. So they would find this handycam and they would play what was last recorded, and they would see me recording all those objects, and in the end they would see me in the mirror. So that
Because it reminded me a bit of possibilities of installation to evoke a virtual dimension. Then if you add a voice transmission, regardless of where you come from New York or from the next door, it creates again this interactive illusion. Beautiful, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think all the speakers.
Where was it installed? In the theater or in an actual house?
It was in an actual house.
Actual house?
Yeah, in an aristocratic house in Bucharest. So the background of the story was more complex. So apart from the Armenian side, it was also
a Romanian and there was another thing. When the tenant would come in, they saw like offices on their right and on their left, like actual offices, and I would tell them, here is a law office, here you have I don't know what, and you had all the lawyers coming and saying hi. Everyone in the house knew that this performance was taking place on the -1 level.
Yeah.
So everyone was in the game. And just wanted to make it clear about the Armenian diaspora. Now we have Armenians all over the country, but unfortunately, and you were right, Mr. Kidwood did not mention this, they fled when they sensed the communism is coming. Well, actually before that, when we had that tiny period of nationalism, when we had the alliance with the Germans, Armenians were also afraid. They were Christians, so the problem wasn't as big as the problem with the Jews, but they were pretty wealthy. And a lot of Romanians had this issue with minorities having a lot of properties and being, the main ones in the businesses. So that was the first wave of migration towards America. The second one was when the communism came, and during the communist period, a lot of Armenians from Romania went to America, and that's why now in Los Angeles, you have 1 million Armenians just in California. And I think a third of them are Armenians coming from Romania during the communism period. And we also have the last wave of migration in Romania coming from Armenia after the falling of the communism there. So in the 90s, they came here.
From the expertise that you have right now, would you say in the telematic work we do in theater at the moment, do we have enough emotion?
I think so, we do, but sometimes the difficulty is to bring it out from the actors and obviously also transfer that into your audiences. The difficulty is because of all these different angles. So we have the theatrical space and now we're having a camera space as well. So we're bringing both together, we're bringing film techniques together with theater techniques. And also we have to take into consideration that what reads on a camera, the camera reads much smaller movements than like in a theatrical space. the actual movements, the expression needs to be much bigger. So it's about finding the balance, and this is like down to directors to be able to direct this.
We are after a whole day of talks or theoretical talks or sharing experience about work in the field. What do you take with you after this day?
A lot. I've learned obviously a lot about cultural migration, which was really, really interesting. There's so many things that, even though I traveled a lot in my job, that you don't know, you just don't realize how people live and societies form and why they have to migrate and why such an important message to the world. Then from an aesthetic aspect, I found it really interesting to learn about choreography with drones. That is now in the pipeline, and I found it really, really interesting. It's something I probably want to try in the future myself, and it's just nice to be in the room with people like-minded people, because we are such a small world. The telematics world is very niche, and hopefully we can actually create a really strong community through forums like this, and spread the word out and create a new genre of theatre.
Do you think there is an interest in the audience on telematic theatre at the moment?
Not at the moment, because it's still very much restricted to universities and research platforms. It needs to go out, but this is how it always starts. So something new starts in a university level, and we need to create something that is a more commercial, marketable product.
That's not easy to answer, because one would have to look at the offerings in theaters in different countries. In Germany, for example, you have a very strong theatrical tradition in many cities, big theaters that have annual seasons where they plan their productions of plays, sometimes very well-known plays, sometimes new plays. And I don't know whether you could market perhaps a telepresent program during the year, or whether you do it as a special occasion. I think if you present a festival of, for example, telematic performance, it would attract interest among people. And it is probably a process of spreading the word about new and experimental forms of theatre that involve media, that are perhaps related to film, virtual reality, and cyberspace. And I think people are interested in innovation, and they may come to take a look. Whether it will then surprise them to find a naturalist or realist acting style in cyber theatre, I don't know. Perhaps the writing for Telepresence or the scripting for these performances will have to also develop and keep perhaps surprising audiences, making them feel that they are part of a new generation of perhaps, I don't know what you would call it, telepresence plays or telepresence operas. I think there are ways to market something that would then arouse interest. Also, I think in the United States, I know that opera houses have started to promote their productions that can be streamed. So perhaps theaters could say, well, during a particular month we're streaming all our plays, and we're beginning to gradually integrate live streams into our development of the outreach of performance.
So after this full day of talks and people who shared theoretical stuff or from their practical experiences, what's the main idea you take back, or what thoughts you leave the place with?
The symposium today for me was convincing and fascinating, because it dealt with two areas of investigation, the socio-economic, cultural issue of migration, and then the telepresence collaboration between Romanian artists and artists in Spain and Portugal. So I was very interested in learning more about how the productions evolved in terms of the theatrical content, which was migration, but also in the artistic compositional form. And we heard a number of lectures today that dealt with virtual reality, with new media, with the digital, and with VR. And I think the possibilities of the new media have given us much to think about today, because the theater is a very old-fashioned medium. And I think we learned today that camera work or transmission work using the network, linking sites, creates also a challenge, I think, for the writing, for the making of the piece. And I, of course, was also very happy to learn about the issue of migration within Romania, for example. Your particular talk really amazed me, to look at how artists are understanding minority culture within the main culture, and also that means within a mainstream medium such as theater. Yeah? How are minorities or migrants or refugees or newly arrived workers represented in a mainstream medium? And can new techno media that are connected to social media also, the way people communicate through telephone and Facebook and Skype, how can that become a trigger to communicate about our existential concerns regarding our life, families, our place to live, and the future of Europe. This symposium today, for me, also looks at the shifts that we're seeing in Europe becoming larger, and yet, struggling to keep its sense of hope, that this Europe can be a place where we can freely move.
Is it important to gather in meetings like this and discuss new technologies in theater, and if yes, why?
Why not? I think it's good for sharing ideas and approaches, tactics. Sometimes you think in parallel, so there's discussion going on and it helps you to get a fix on something you might be working on or bothering about in the field. Some of the fruitful exchange also happens outside of the session, just chatting with people about their particular solutions perhaps, or even something as simple as what platform they use. So, yeah.
Was it anything that struck you today? Was anything that...
Well, a number of things. I suppose there have been a number of themes that have arisen, or lines that have run through various of the contributions today. I think I've emerged with a clearer sense that actually there's not a single phenomenon, such as that we can describe as telepresent performance. It seems to me that it's very different to make something for online spectatorship, possibly by one person at a monitor, than it is to make something for a co-present audience. And that's different again from making, someone mentioned the Katie Mitchell type live cinema. That's different again, that's a theatrical experience. So I think I have a sense of wanting to be quite calibrated about what sorts of performance experience is being produced. I also thought there was an interesting prospect that was just mentioned in the presentation by Javier, where he mentioned the kind of Brechtian Befremdungseffect that operates because you're aware that there is this separation of spaces, and you're probably aware of the mediating device in action as well. And we didn't really pursue that, but it makes me think that there's something, there's something interesting about that inherently you might, can we say, the inherently Brechtian feature of telepresent performance, where you're always aware of the work of mediation.
In which way is it different what you know now about telematic work in theater than it was when you did the application 2.5 years ago?
Yes, I think first of all it's a question of telematic cooperation. So I think I know more about how we can work together from a distance and help each other and understand each other, and also how the medium used, the internet, can sometimes amplify conflicts actually. So the internet might create false conflicts because we can't really understand the situation as if we were there. So I think being calmer in certain situations would serve the collaboration more. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, of course, there's the subject of dramaturgy, the way you actually create a performance starting from scratch, integrating the subject with the technology. So I think I would be able to do this more easily, perhaps, for future projects.
What would you advise the people who would want to do the same type of project now knowing what you know?
To take care and buy all the equipment before starting, or a big part of the equipment of the infrastructure, because if you don't have microphones, if you don't have cameras from the start, you can't really work, because rehearsals happen mostly online. So take care and have everything you need from the start, especially good microphones, because sound is a very important channel of communication in this situation. And apart from that, alternating periods of developing the technology with testing the technology with the actors in rehearsal. So there shouldn't be divergent processes, but they should go hand in hand, and we should allot enough time to test things and make changes when needed.
Do you think there is a prospect for the audience to start to get interest in this type of work?
I think so. I mean, the telematic performance generated a lot of interest in Romania and in Spain. So people without any knowledge of experimental performance came to see it and enjoyed it and empathized with the characters and understood the story. So yes, I think the form has a lot of potential and can convey a lot of emotion.
Next time you do a project like this, would you choose the same structure of the text, or would you go for something else? Would you try a different form?
I think I would try a different form, perhaps less fragmented, because it was difficult to synchronize two parallel actions, one happening in Romania and the other one in Spain. If we had a scene, then a transition, another scene, then a transition. So perhaps, yes, I would reduce the degree of fragmentation.
Okay, so and my last question, which was something that I already asked you today, and it was a little bit misunderstood, but I think you got what I wanted to say, which is you're also the artistic director of the whole project, and you're the theater director of the performance itself, which is regardless of the research and everything. So my question is, and also like it could serve as an advice for another theater director or artist who would want to start the same type of project what you did. How did you manage those two different jobs of coordinating everyone and all the teams, and also be a creator yourself?
Yes, it was very difficult. Like, I would have liked to have a producer or someone else to do the rest of the things and allow me to focus mostly on the artistic process. Of course, it was useful to be able to control that side myself without depending too much on other people, but at the same time it was cumbersome. So I really don't know what the best option is. It's good to be able to control it, but yeah.
Next time, would you take a coordinator, or would you do it yourself again?
Yeah, I don't know yet.
You have to sleep on it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I'd like to open by asking Marina, as our host, perhaps to say a few words, and again thanking you to bring us in. I really enjoyed coming. You have published a book, you have done all of this work, but there was the Portuguese part. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yes. From my point of view, the films are not fully accomplished. Like, they are finished, but I would say that, and I think I touched upon that a bit, that I feel they did not use a specific language for 360 degrees. So they used a more cinematic, traditional language to tell a story that was not suited for the medium they actually used. That was my feeling. Actually, I disagree with the artists who worked on the Portuguese films, because they felt that the cuts were appropriate. I felt like the continuity of experience would have been more suitable for this type of work.
Because when you invited me, you said we've just done the Planet of the Lost Dreams, and then now the next stage will be the Portuguese side, and I was initially thinking you are the Portuguese side, but you're not the Portuguese side. And did you see the Portuguese work? Have you seen it?
Yeah. You are talking about the participants or the movies?
The movies.
Yeah, I have seen them.
You have seen them?
Yeah.
Have you seen
Portugal? No, the Portugal, I don't know if finished.
And have you seen
Yeah,
it?
no,
Sylvia?
I haven't sent the links, but I can do that if you wish.
Because I think you told us that it's a 2-year project, and I thought that's an interesting shift from telematic theater to the VR. And so I have to have a look, what they did. And,
yes.
And ultimately, it goes back to what I said to Javier. You did a project that had 2 dimensions: socio-cultural, on migration, and then the technological, exploration of how to mediate that. And I think it would be good to look at those 2 sides again, because I said to Javier, we learn more about Romania and less about Murcia and, let's say, southern Spain's host role to migrant workers, or do you have African immigrants in Spain? You do, of course. Look at France in the post-colonial context. These are political questions, and then in terms of the media, this is wide open, what you do with it and how you reach an audience. But I would be interested in the cultural collaboration between Romania, Spanish team and Portuguese team, and how you felt it turned out.
Yeah, I think we discovered we have things in common, including the language. Sometimes we can understand each other simply by speaking in Romanian, in Spanish, even in Portuguese. This was one side of it. Do you want to add something about?
No, I think that I always say we are Mediterranean. We have some, anyways, Africa, or we are Mediterranean. I read here, and the eat or the culture is very similar. Very similar. Other things to do, but other things similar. When we start,
although Romania does not touch the Mediterranean, does it?
No, but I know, but I understand that it's a big culture. The idea.
The Latin. It's the Latin people.
Yes, I think that's the Lina or I don't know, but I understand that it's maybe the Romanian. I don't know. But when we meet, yes, we start to work in the same level. I think that this is the important. That's the question. Work at for the same objective.
And in terms of migration, for instance, the way the theme was reflected in the performance compared to the films was quite similar up to a point. Like the stories of children left behind in Portugal were similar to those of left behind children in Romania. So we had children here in Romania watching the films with subtitles, and some of them told me that they cried. And in the questionnaires, we had a section for profiling the audience. And indeed, a big part of the people who watched the films had experienced something similar to the films, to the stories of Portuguese migration, even though they were Romanian.
So you are looking at certain kind of emotional empathy or cross-cultural sharing of this particular predicament of families being, split, and that's why you chose the storytelling approach, yes. Narrative. Yes. And I guess you also are telling story.
Yeah, actually that was a very strong, let's say, experience which was somehow new for me, because I'm more or less used into telling stories through theater, where you have, let's say, much more somehow liberty in dealing with the material, because you have an actor representing somebody, so you have different levels of representing reality. And from the beginning, this was somehow very much the question for me, how you can tell the story of somebody who you are not, and how you are entitled to decide how to tell the story, and how you can become entitled to say that story or not. So for us, or at least for me, because we had a board of for a bunch of organizations which sustained us, we had a lot of representatives of the groups which we worked with and talked about the scripts, and we had feedback on how to build up the story.
If I may mention Professor Kivu, he did in the coffee admit to me that he has traveled to villages, and he also is aware of the Roma. And he said when he sometimes tried to interview them, they don't admit that they are Roma. And it's like in Texas, illegal immigrants don't necessarily say, "Hi, I'm an illegal immigrant." Yeah? They are submerged in the Latino neighborhood and integrate somehow, invisibly or visibly. And I don't know, the Roma, I think it's more complicated, but I really thought it was interesting that you mentioned the fact that they may not want to speak to you, or don't necessarily say they're Roma when they're in Turkey.
In Turkey, somehow for some neighborhoods and in some parts, the situation is much better than in Romania and than in Europe. In Turkey, the President Erdogan, like 3 or 4 years ago probably, because he wanted more votes, he made some commitments. He participated. They have a huge amount of organizations which were supported by the state. He participated at the Federation rally of Roma NGOs, and he kind of apologized for which is obviously very rare, like Carmine could say. So he had a very positive attitude, but at the same time they're still dismantling neighborhoods which are in parts of urban development. But I would go do something which Marina said and put, let's say, a bit of my experience into, because I was kind of having the same kind of thought working with VR. I have never really worked with telematic performances, but somehow I think they might have the same challenges as working with VR or 360 film, because she said that she has the feeling that they are somehow not finished products or achieved, and I somehow have the same feeling also about my work in VR, or some of them, and this is very much connected with the fact that at the first level you are very used, let's say, with theater. You know how to plan, you know how it will go on, you know where you will have problems. It's something you can predict, but working with the VR, it was 100% hectic. It was, I never knew what's happening. Really, like, I never knew what's happening. So it was, I think, the first time in my work as an artist when I had like to throw away hours of filming because we didn't do it good, and then we had materials which we were crazy about, but actually we couldn't be using because, I don't know, we had the tribe, but we had image but no sound. We had, so it's really like the field in itself, it's really early. When we got to post-production, because we were we wanted to have 360 stereoscopic image, and we filmed like this. But then when we tried to edit this, it was crazy. It didn't work with our best computer in the center. Of course, you can edit, but it's not the same as you are used in cinematography. And basically now, with the reality that with amazingly few exceptions, mostly the work in VR is not at all at the same level as the user, and we as artists are experienced in when you watch a movie. So you don't have the same type of quality. So this puts a lot of perspective on the work, and as well everything is somehow like a complete trial, because you even these very simple things with cutting or not cutting the material, how you do it, how you don't do it, how often, how it's true that we are just like babies starting to walk, and
I mean, I don't know, Sylvia, how you feel, but I certainly, when I look at my early telematic work, it's embarrassing to me, and also the quality is so bad now. And I gave it up after 5 years. It was too time-consuming to logistically prepare multi-site performances and rehearse for them. And so I've dropped it. But now in the last couple of years, I'm beginning to think maybe low-tech, smaller challenges could be more interesting now.
Short pieces,
low
tech.
And then see how, in terms of what I teach, it's called digital performance. How I can learn from the students, how they today, like I was surprised Andrea said she was shy. I mean, I believe her, but I would think that students want to use their phones, yeah, and they can make films with the phone now, yeah.
But there's a lot we're teaching a lot of film work as well in our courses, and there's obviously a lot going on now with the self-taping, you know, like for auditions, like everybody, you just get sent a script and then you have to self-tape and read to the camera. So, but quite surprisingly, when we first stood up with our students who are constantly on their Instagram or Snapchat, they find that really intimidating. They can't do it. They can't just read to the phone that's right there in their face.
Really?
They find that really difficult. And these are outgoing theatre students who like scream and shout down the corridor. And as soon as you put the phone from out the script and there's an off-screen reader, they go freeze, and they find it difficult, and the eyes shift and everything goes like that. So. In an educational setting, you might agree or disagree to that. At the moment, we are shifting a lot of our focus that we are integrating more technology in our teaching, like filming work. We're working with the film students working to the camera, and it is so important for them to become comfortable with the camera, because there is so much work now. Obviously, also like so they don't restrict themselves just with theatrical work. But I think this is why we need to pick this up and, like I said, make it low-tech. But if you set up a good infrastructure in a studio that can be permanently embedded in the studio, so I'm not talking mobile, that's more complicated, but although with GoPros and things like that, everything is possible. But if you set up an infrastructure, you can always have a working space to create and connect to people instantly who want to work like that. I think we need to find like-minded practitioners and maybe have a perma setup where somebody in Portugal could just say like, hey Sylvia, do you want to do a choreography with me, like we're doing X, Y, Z, or Marina, do you want to create a poem on something or whatever. So you can instantly collaborate. So I think if we start at universities and colleges maybe and set up infrastructures of collaboration, and then
but this is where maybe we do not have the common space that I try to address today, because when I saw Station House Opera preparing the set, Maynard Smith wanted the people in Gaza have the same set as the ones in London, same camera, same audio link. Yeah. So, but it was not so easy for people in Palestine to set the technical side. And you will find this in many less developed areas, regional areas. Yeah.
But that's how you can get theatre makers together. Because there are theatre makers in areas who would love to collaborate with their camera, and this is what telematics does. So you're bringing people together. So, I mean, even like in the war zones, there are still creative people there who want to do something to distract from the cruelty of what's going on, or the cruelty in these communities. So it's not to say there are creative people in there who want to come out and collaborate, but they can't.
By the way, technical skills can be used remotely as well.
Absolutely.
Via TeamViewer. So TeamViewer saved our lives lots of times, because the interaction designer, Cristian Iordache, would enter our computers from Bucharest and solve the issues even during the performance. Like, he monitored the performance. So, yeah.
But it's very interesting for me that you study emotion in your PhD regarding the telepresence and stuff, and because I remember we talked when you had the premiere of your show that a lot of the people that were at your show said that they were really skeptical that the whole Skype thing would not be a barrier, or that, but actually, and also from my point of view, from what I talked with others, it actually, we are so used with the Skype in our lives nowadays that seeing it in a performance, it's a lot different in this year than it was, like, let's say 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Like, technology nowadays is such an important part of who we are, than to see like 1 hour and a half of performance, which is a Skype all the way. It's like the fourth minute I forgot it's a Skype. I mean, and I didn't forget it's a Skype, but I was so used to it, like I just took it as it is. Also, they are talking to Skype all the time, so it didn't work as a barrier. So I focused on the story, which is a kind of like classical story. But I wanted to ask you, in terms of emotion, how do people, the audience at this sort of performances, you feel they react, or what's the feedback you get in terms of emotion? Like, are they engaged? Are they touched by it? Or because the preconception, let's say, is that people at these types of performances tend to be more, at least here in our theatrical environment, I would say.
Sure, it obviously depends on the content of the pieces. Like obviously it has to have relevance to that particular audience, and they're watching it probably for a reason. And this is when we are talking about, again, like the whole setup of the stage, which is much more complicated, because what you don't want to do is shut the audience out with the emotion. So it's kind of a multi-dimensional kind of platform for directors having to problem solve. So as a director, it's really complicated because you have to integrate your online audience, your online actor, and your live audience in the studio. And this is kind of like we were experimenting a lot, certainly in the first piece, where we had much more time, where we had like over a year of weekly sessions, and then much more when the Ultra Group was up and running. We had like bi-weekly sessions, and then every day in the run up to the show. So we really had time to experiment, and as director, like play around where the seats have to be, sit in different seats and see how it affects you, like at every single angle, at every single seat. I mean, this is still a small-scale theatre production. Of course, we had no more than, we had about 100 people in the audience. And it becomes problematic, obviously, the further away you sit, and then still have, like, you know, get involved. We had generally very good feedback. And the second setup, I made it so immersive. My actors were already, like, I made a squat, literally, with, like, I had all the rubbish bins emptied onto the stage and everything, and, like, all chairs, armchairs in there, all computers. And then I had the audience walk through that, where the actors were already there doing their thing. You know, the actors were there, and the live audience walked in before the screens even started, before anybody said anything, before the house lights went down. It was just a setup already. They were involved in the whole thing. So there are different ways of doing that. I can see it like a little bit like evolving, like, you know, all night, you know, Punch Drunk probably, or something like, you know, there's some very immersive pieces. There was one on the Great Gatsby, and the same guy's doing something on the Wolf of Wall Street, which is quite peculiar, like an immersive piece where the audience will take part. This is going to be created in London soon. Wherever you are, I mean, as directors, we flew over when we directed Vegas. The cast never met, but us directors, we had an exchange. We flew over, and the Vegas directors came over. And suddenly things that didn't make sense to us at all, that they were talking to us about, this doesn't read, this doesn't do that. When we were in the other space and saw our cast, was like, oh, okay, that now makes sense, you know. And so we had the luxury of experimentation. That set me up for the next project. The next project, I worked with people who've never done telematics before, but I could just say, do this thing, that, because this doesn't work, don't do it. And knowing already the pitfalls on both sides kind of helped me take over a little bit and restage the angles. But we did it in the studio.
So we had a commercial done for Vodafone with a guy who was playing at his guitar in a pop star concert, and he was projected on a Pepper Ghost system. So for the people in the audience, it was like he was there. Like they had to show it that it's not there in order that people believe that he is not there. So it's just, and this was done by 5G transmitting data. We don't know if it was 5G of one phone or 5 phones or whatever, but allegedly it's just by transmitting data on 5G in Bucharest. So how much time will it take to do it between two countries? So
you have like a hologram of a performer.
Yeah, by a thing which will be accessible
to anyone,
to everyone, basically. It's fair. There are still debates or discussions on how fast it will happen, but actually the quality of the telematic presence, it's subject just to the investment of in technology. We can have pretty strong presence experience already.
Yeah. They actually recreated for concerts, like famous singers.
Yeah, exactly.
Billie Holiday.
It's the same thing, just that
yeah, it's totally computer generated. So it's just a concert that never happened. They just recreated the person in a hologram. So.
I remember now in 1982 in Dallas, Barcelona, Freddie Mercury and Montserrat are preparing during the years the song, and Freddie died months before. The technology can be done, and it's amazing. All people crying when you hear the song, because the technology is the question. The question is always the phone, the message, I think.
Yes.
So when you go to the theatre, it's an experience, so you're always creating an experience to the audience. So this is why I find this emotional connection is kind of important, whether we talk obviously between performers. As a choreographer, I try to create something between my dancers that they're connecting, so it needs to have some kind of meaning. The storytelling comes often through this connection, of course, same with the acting, the dialogue. But also like the emotional connection to the audience, or that the audience feels, is really, really important. We can certainly create a Brechtian piece and make it more about the space and about the message, etc. But that's still an emotional connection. There's still an emotional connection somewhere in there to your audience, and there's still a connection between performers.
If you were to do it again, would you do anything differently, or what would you make next if you were all working collectively on number 2?
I would alternate the testing of the technology period with rehearsals. So develop the technology, then test it with the actors in rehearsals, then take a break and see what needs to be adjusted, then go back to rehearsals. So I would alternate the process more, because we had some problems with technology. Initially, we wanted to communicate via the screen, like you did. So put a webcam in the middle of the screen, and the actors would be talking via the screen. But we thought that didn't really work for several reasons for this performance. For instance, if the actors looked into the camera, of course they gave the impression of looking into the audience in the other space. If they were actually looking at the mother projected on the screen, they would not give the impression of looking. So it was a disconnection at this point. Mm-hmm. So that's why we decided to include the smartphone as the main communication device between the actors. So that actually disturbed the whole application. So we had lots of bugs in the application. The Kinect didn't work properly because the image had to be cropped anyway. So yeah, this hindered the process. The actors had to wait a lot during rehearsals for the technology to work. So yeah, this is one thing I would definitely do differently.
Yes, I think that the result is good. Obviously, when you have the dimension of the job and you have the mistakes, you can change. But I can repeat again with even the discussion. It's the technology needs time, needs try, needs study, needs learn, and in this project, all the team are learning. I think the whole question in a professional production. In the streets, let's say in Spain, in a professional production, you have to do this. But I think that the moment that the actors are saying that technicians are working, it's part of the process. All learn, all be constant about the heart of these kind of jobs and the importance of the technician jobs.
I might go for a different dramaturgy the next time. I mean, narratively speaking, we had an episodic play, basically, because the action happened throughout 11 years. There was a scene, then a pause, then a scene, then a pause. So during the first performances, this was quite difficult for the audience because we wouldn't show what was happening in Spain. We just put glitches that would distort the image in the other space. So people got bored during these transitions. And later on, we decided to show what's happening in Spain, and that's when things became more smooth than they were. But yeah, I think I would go for a less fragmented story.
But you also had the audience watching in actual space with co-present performers,
yeah,
and understanding the connection through the screen. But you didn't put the whole thing together in the screen in one setting,
no,
which was the Station House Opera model
yeah,
that you guys talked about earlier. So it seems to me that those are two quite distinct approaches, which would have maybe even thematically, but certainly dramaturgically different different dividends. So I wonder what if you were to do it again, would you do the same thing? In other words, not bring the two spaces into the same virtual space.
Well, I think it would depend on the subject chosen. The subject of the performance would perhaps influence the way I choose the image in the other space. I remember that you, Johannes, told me in the email that sometimes this caused confusion for you because you expected the screen to be identified with the space in Spain, but we mixed it with images from Romania. So I think it would depend on the subject chosen. I would explore some other approaches, yes, but I can't say at this point.
Are you interested in, I don't know whether you will continue to work telematically, but are you interested in pursuing further the question of the camera in the theater? Because I think if you look at, again, the history, last 40 years, maybe even longer, once film became available in larger cultures, theater directors wanted to try it out. And in several instances, I've seen very interesting productions, modern theater, using video and film as a second or as another space. Yeah? So you show some action on stage and then you show other things that you don't show on stage through the film. And I think it's still a rich area to explore. Or do you want to continue working with two sides? You don't know.
No, I think I might consider it even 3 sides.
Three sides?
More
Okay,
sides.
well.
As long as the dramaturgy supports it. I mean, it shouldn't be just for spectacular reasons. It should have a purpose in the piece.
Something with all the continents. Something really global.
Yeah, but we're not. This is the beginning. But the question is, it's interesting by the audience. That's the question. I think if the people expect something out this, it's okay. I think it's poetical, but why not?
I mean, it takes, I think, an aesthetic decision-making process. For example, who did I see in London, or Katie Mitchell, or there were people in Berlin who worked a lot with film on stage. So they had the film crew on stage. So they have she did a piece by Ibsen, I think, that I saw. So there is this dramatic action, and then there is a second level, there's a filming action. It was quite beautiful.
There was also this puppet company which is doing critical piece on First World War and which they are doing small puppets and
with the camera on top. You can do wonderful things with the camera.
But one thing which I think it's a very important element is the competition, let's say, or the participatory part, because somehow there are all those environments which are really amazing telematic tools, like Facebook, which offers really a huge of telematic experience, and everybody is using it, and everybody is really performing. It's really a performance, and which is coming very much from the grassroots and from the people which are used into having those tools and used into having access and saying what they want and doing what they want.
Going to social media.
Yeah.
Social media.
Yeah. And it's the, I don't know, like at least in Romania, it's a huge thing doing this live session with guys which are performing something. I don't know, they can be just saying the same stupid joke or singing the song, and everyone
is watching.
And you have a huge amount of people watching them. I've been watching for a long time a guy who was a shepherd, and he's just putting his live sessions on Facebook, and he gets to have like more than thousands of followers in the same time. We don't have this kind of reach.
Sheep videos.
No, he's just staying near his herd and talking to the phone, or he's just alone in the night in the cottage, sometimes even without light, and he's just putting the video on, and he's babbling, and he's drawing people around. And also you have all this kind of more and more sophisticated experience which games are bringing, where people are joining in with avatars, and now you start to have avatars of people which are moving and controlled with the body. So actually I think one very important thing will be in this evolution how the tools will get developed, that everybody gets telematic exposure in a virtual environment. So everybody will be in the scene with a telematic presence which he controls.
Depends what you make also. You know, if the piece is about technology and showing the technology, that's one thing. In the first piece that we've created, we deliberately wanted to eliminate the notion that there's any technology involved. So the camera was so hidden that that was kind of the purpose of the technology department, actually, that not us creators, they wanted to deliberately show the world that it's a means, like Heidegger is like saying like technology is a means to an end, kind of thing. But it should not be, technology helps us make that production, but it's not about the technology, that's what they said. They don't want it to be about the technology. So that was an interesting aspect.
Well, in this case, they're listening to the shepherd, not to the technology.
Yeah.
So,
But also what's
but you still have
important
the phone,
is,
you see that your phone.
is that the expectations which are created by the technology and by the platforms will shape somehow the experience. I don't know, for instance, I was, of course, when I was a kid, I wanted to make a photo, and my dream was to have a camera. And I was like, when I thought that it would be possible to have a filming camera, it was an outrage. My daughter, she wants to have a camera so she can have a YouTube channel, and she's doing always recording stuff for her future YouTube channel, and that's her, like, that's, she doesn't, that's the thing, it's no other thing. So the expectations, like, that's her place, that's her thing. She's watching YouTube, she wants to do YouTube, and it comes natural. And seeing her, I realized that, oh my God, I'm an artist. I never thought about using this otherwise than putting my trailers, or I don't know. I didn't thought about as a medium for my expression, but the 11-year-old kid, it's the way of expressing for her.
I think in a way it comes in contradiction to our formation somehow, because we are formed in theater, which is about representation, and somehow like it's interesting what your comment about Andreas when she said she's nervous because about your students as well, because this is our field. We represent dramaturgy, we represent ourselves, we represent emotion, and then we talk about these new technologies, and these new technologies are better used than people who are younger than us, and they also come on package with the way they represent themselves, which I think it creates on us a lot of anxiety, because we still, even when you create theater, it still stick to an old form of how we were doing things, and their easiness to how they, I mean, what Alexander was saying, how the kids are representing. I mean, it's a whole culture of people learning from a very, very small age how to represent themselves. And we didn't have these models because we didn't have access to platforms. So our role models were TV presenters and then actors, and then so we had to get through all those gatekeepers. So you couldn't get on television, you couldn't get in theater school, you couldn't get in a theater. And right now it's so democratic. You just have a phone, and in 5 minutes it's all on you. So I think this is also interesting somehow, because like, I mean, we kind of like try to keep up, but in a way, like, you know, at core level, I think we are a little bit like we don't understand. Like I'm thinking right now, I'm doing a show with a vlogger, and I had a meeting, and I was like he's 17 years old. It's so smart, and like it gives me anxiety how easy he is, and I'm not an anxious person usually, so it's like.
And also I think it's also one thing which is completely, let's say, changing the perspective, because exactly if you are a director, and let's see how it was at least in Romania, you're in the 60s, you were graduating, I was not in the 60s, graduating in 2000, but and even in 2000 it was a luxury, because we were, I don't know, I graduated in 2002, so I was in a country where you had more than 5 directors coming out a year only for 10 years, so there were no directors. Everybody wanted to have somebody young in the theater, so it was nice. I was very lucky.
Yeah.
In the 60s, when they graduated, they were even more crazy about them, because they were really no directors. So you have this wave of Romanian directors which were treated like prince in the theaters, and they were really at their debut and given up theaters. Like you would have one director which would be having 40 actors to work with, nothing to do, because they didn't have discos even, they could only drink between themselves. And they had the budget, and they decided what to do on the thing which was the only cultural institution sometimes in the town. And now those guys, which also he is speaking about, they are in a completely different perspective. They are they're poor buggers in a place where are 1 billion guys posting every moment. So they need to come to somehow make it think very strong in order to get some attention.
But
so they need to be
how
very
do you
inventive.
now make a judgment or a critical how do you critically view this? For example, let's go back into university. I don't know, Andy, about your school, but I was away for a few months and I came back to see the final shows of my students. And they've taken a liking to the Kinect camera. But the work I saw was bad, because I don't think they really delved into the software and they experimented with the Kinect. They just turned it on and they did something in front of it. So you'd see a shadow or a 3D. And it wasn't very interesting. So I'd like to see them then to actually seriously engage with the Kinect camera and see what can it do for me artistically, or what can I do with it that's not like what everyone else is doing. Or, I mean, how do you see it? Do the young people actually engage with these? Camera is an artistic instrument, right? Cinematography is not something you just do. You have to learn it.
Right? This goes back to an old...
Is that an old-fashioned view?
But, well, nothing wrong with that, I think. I was going to say it goes back to the older view of what an artist is and does. So an artist
That's a craft.
Uses a medium in, broadly speaking, a meant way in order to communicate or to make meaning. So, to address something you raised just a minute ago, what do our students do? We have a facilitative model, we don't direct them. I'm not sure we very much teach them. We just sort of give them opportunity. And they seem to make anything but theatre. So they default to installations, they make a lot of video, they come with competencies, they like performance art, live art, so that kind of thing, solo performance. Someone was mentioning the other day about students doing work around identity,
gender,
the self, gender, that kind of thing. Was that what you had? Anyway, yes, so that's what they do.
Is it any good?
It's often really good. partly because they're making things out of their own experience and idiom that we couldn't possibly make form. But some of this discussion has made me think, and this is going back a little bit now as well, has made me think of some of the work of Robert Lepage and maybe the Builders Association as well, working with cameras in the rehearsal room in order to develop pieces that are very, very thematic, but that in some way harness some inherent principles of how these media work together. And it seems to me that this is still an opportunity for telepresent performance, because it is so profoundly to do with separation, communication, some kind of figuring of intimacies where that is also immediately not somehow fully realizable. And those are very rich topics. But then I think there's no single standard for it. So there's no single platform. This comes back to your point about having a group of potential collaborators who might just drop in at any moment. You'd have to develop all the same platform, the same communication protocol. You have to have done the bashing that you've done about sight lines, where you put the Kinect, that's what we're using.
It's all about planning.
These are hard won. Yeah, they're hard won. It's almost like proliferating a company model into a plural network.
Because if your expectation is to be able to really make your presence felt in the digital environment, either on YouTube, Facebook, or whatever, then when you are somehow engaged into a telematic piece, you would have this feeling, so that it would be normal that you are engaged somehow there. So that's why I think it's very important when you are saying that it's important about how you engage the audience and the level to which you need to address it, so at a very high standard actually now. And on the other side, again, I think it's, let's say, somehow much harder for an artist today than it was when
it's harder, you say?
I think it's harder because they need to if you don't know how to code, like you don't know how to tell a story, but you need to also be able to code. You need to work with all those tools. It's complicated. I think it's somehow more complicated. Like when I was a student, I just had to light up a candle, and you had a nice atmosphere, and it worked. Everybody was.
Maybe
really
we will go back to that.
enchanted.
Maybe to be on session again. Everyone will be so bored of all this digital stuff.
Then already the guys which came like after 5 years I graduated, they were so obliged like to have technology in their performance. If they didn't have a computer or a TV working with image and with some, it was obvious, like from my generation to 5 years, and later on, it's getting. They have to learn more things in order to be there. I think. Using those technology, of course, doesn't make you smarter or better as an artist.
I'm not sure that I even understand what I'm trying to say, but Andy, help me. I've observed in my university there is a music school that I admire. There are a number of composers, and there's now a young generation of music students who doesn't read score and doesn't give a shit about score, and they're on their laptops. Yeah, the composers would like all music students to read score and be able to compose. What's the contradiction here? Are we beyond that craft of composing? Are we now working all with laptops? Does it no longer matter whether you can read a score? And where does this go in terms of education or an understanding of what music or what sonic art is? Has it all been changing now?
You have to make decisions.
The computer actually can print out, if you play on the software, the computer can print it out as a score. But it's different from actually writing music.
Well, this is like performance art, you know, love it or hate it, you know, it's one of those things, it's taste, and I think you can make music, like performance, you can make performance out of anything, you can make music with anything. People are composing with the noises of the environment, don't they, nowadays? So I think, but I agree with you.
Well,
I would say
they're closing down the music
should
school,
be
so
able
very soon
to.
it will be gone. They're about to close down the music school.
Well, the frightening thing, we have to say, we have a music department, and the frightening thing is, if I see somebody walking, like coming for an interview with a BA Honours in music, I would expect them to a score read it, sight read it, or something. You know, it doesn't matter what instrument, sing it, whatever. But they can't.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't give them a BA Honours in music, because it's a tool, isn't it? It's an essential tool. Like us choreographers have a choreography toolkit. You need to understand it. You need to understand it. And I want to just say finally something to the social media thing. So, because I'm going forth and back to LA every year, we have an exchange with the studio school, and my actor friends over there, I mean, the landscape has changed enormously. So not just the self-taping, but it's creating content on Instagram. So they have to have a minimum of 1,000 followers to be considered by casting directors. They have to create content every single day.
10,000?
Well,
1,000.
1,000 minimum, but 10,000 is even better. I've got friends who write books and everything and are performers, and I've spoken to one of my friends and said, I'm so sick and tired of it, I don't know what to do anymore. So every day, little clips, so to keep the audience interested, to keep their followers interested. So that's a complete different dimension. Well, I'm glad too. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm glad I'm not a performer anymore. I wouldn't want to do that. But the stress of it, he said, like, he needs to have a detox of it all, because he said, like, I need to shut down the grid for like a couple of weeks because I can't cope anymore, because he's promoting 2 books, then himself as an actor, himself as a choreographer and everything. And it's really like.
And then he also performs.
I've even been filming him when I was over there. And he's like, "This is a great spot. Okay, film me." I was like, "Okay." It's like, and then he does something. You know, it comes outrageous choreography or something, because he does a lot of comedy. So, but it's strenuous. I feel for our kids. I feel like, you know, that's the pressure of and
so they won't make it then. There's too much competition.
Well, yeah. But if you're not out there doing stuff, then you'll never make it, you know.
Yeah, I mean the landscape is so different in Europe than in the United States. Like
it's completely
insane.
different. Yeah.
Like here, it's still like there's a lot of people who are like in oh this is really happening. But in the United States, if you're not doing this, then you're out of any economy prospect. Like literally, you either represent yourself all over again, or either you're out.
I think lots of interesting ideas. Let's not say interesting, but very useful ideas were exchanged today. And I would like to thank you all for coming and for accepting our invitation. And next, if you'd like to give us a short interview.
Just like one question
Yeah.
each for we will just one question each, like very short.
And congratulations to the publication of your book.